This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate first part of What If Naruto Was Raised by a Legendary Monk. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Moving soundlessly toward a tiny basket where faint breathing can be heard through the office's darkness was an elderly man dressed in a monk's traditional work attire, though his garments were worn out and tattered. The old man peered over the small sleeping bundle inside the basket and then out the window of the most significant room in the tower. The sounds of death and dying, the living weeping for the dead, coming in from the outside. Gazing through the window, he noticed flames flickering in the darkness. The elderly monk was only made aware of what had occurred a few hours prior. This ninja village was once peaceful until the demon Kyubi no Kitsune attacked. The monk turned his back on the child in the basket and turned away from the window, not even a trace of regret for the villagers. Gazing at the small blonde child with a sorrowful expression concealed behind his eyes, the monk thought, so young, so frail, yet given an unbearable burden, a burden to house a demon for the rest of his short life. He was thinking, I might as well perform the Kami Kakushi on this child, to just give him a bit of hope away from this village full of fools, when the office door opened, letting in a flood of light that revealed him in front of the youngster. With a sharp tone in his voice, the Sandaime Hokage questioned, who are you and what are you doing here? Even though the battle had only ended a few hours prior, he was still attempting to help put things in some sort of order, so he was still dressed in his combat gear. The monk caught a glimpse of the Sandaime out of the corner of his eye as he peered over his shoulder. The monk turned and said, I'm here for the child, his conical straw hat lowered over his eyes. There was a staff by his side that had 5 rings on top. As he fell into a fighting stance, the Sandaime uttered, I will not let you take him. However, his eyes didn't widen in shock until he noticed the monk's long nose. You are. The monk said, so human, you finally know what I am, as his presence appeared to grow stronger and more expansive. Then you will know that it would do you no good to have my wrath unleashed just after what happened a mere few hours ago. The Sandaime gave up in defeat and looked at the monk for a while before uttering, then if you going to take him, then raise him if you will. I am too old to be doing such things as it is, and no one else will be willing to take care of that child. What are the benefits of this arrangement for me? Inquired the monk, whose presence appeared to be dwindling. Seeing this, the monk continued, surprising the Sandaime. I see, so nothing at all, why not? I've always had a soft spot for orphans anyway. Then can you please raise him within Konoha? I know it will be tough, but for the sake of his father, who loved this village so much and gave his life. The Sandaime asked, breathing a sigh of relief. To rid Konoha of the demon, the monk concluded. After a brief period of silence, the monk said, yes, I know all about it. Since we will be staying here, I would like to make some living arrangements. It is good to know that the monk is willing to remain in Konoha even though he is aware of how irritated he will be by some of the different clans in Konoha. After everything else has calmed down, we can talk about this, the Sandaime said, his smile turning to a frown upon seeing the monk's displeasure. Is something wrong? The monk stated matter. Factly, we'll be taking the small humble temple that is near the called Forest of Death, of this village. The Sandaime stumbled out in shock alone, but that is so soon, I won't be able to get the proper papers nor will it be ready for the two of you. He is aware of the temple that the monk mentions, but it is currently a dilapidated structure that is in danger of collapsing in the event of a severe storm. Given the shockwaves from the demon's attack, it might not even be there right now. It might not be even there anymore. Oh, it's there all right, and it will be ready for the two of us very soon as well, the cheeky looking monk remarked. Before the Sandaime could take any further action, the monk disappeared with the basket. Now, we must make our leave. Though it felt almost like a dream, there were no signs of their departure at all, and the Sandaime knew better. Looking up at the photos of the Hokage who had departed into the next world, the Sandaime remarked, these coming years are going to be interesting, Minato. However, his gaze was fixed on the youthful blonde man, whose azure eyes appeared to pierce the very essence of a person. Gazing at the temple that will serve as their home for the next few years, the monk, perched high above the village in the sky, sighed as he looked down at the sleeping bundle inside his arms and thought, how do I get myself into these sorts of situations again? It will be interesting with taking care of a human child, especially you Naruto. Even with its brightness, the sun was making him blind while it jolted him back to consciousness. He stammered out a few words, then opened his sleepy, black, and hawk like eyes to look at the young child shaking him. The elderly monk said, I'm up, as he settled into his futon. What do you want, Naruto? The 3-year-old pouted and said, Grandpa, you promised that you would take me to the park today. Indeed, 3 long years have passed since the old monk adopted Naruto, and he still doesn't truly regret the choice. That he was having fun being this little human child's grandfather. The elderly monk saw that it was early morning based on the sun's height as he looked down at Naruto and then out the window. With a warm smile, the elderly monk picked up Naruto and held him in his lap. He said, that I did, Naruto, that I did. But if you want to go out and play, you better get out of your pajamas and into your clothes. Then, the monk let go of Naruto and stood up himself. We'll leave once we've finished breakfast. With joy, Naruto nodded and ran to his room in the temple, which wasn't too far from the monk's quarters. After closing the door, Naruto quickly went to his dresser and took out his black hakama and white haori, which, despite his diminutive stature, fit him perfectly. Although some of the children find his clothing peculiar, they quickly come to understand him in part when they see his grandfather. That is, if their parents don't take the young blonde away from them. Just as he was about to disappear through the sliding doorway, he had a flash of insight. The young Naruto asked, trying not to get too upset with his feet for not having his tabi. The young child searched for them for a full 5 minutes before realizing they were haphazardly lying underneath his futon. Not long after he threw them on, Naruto dashed through the corridors and into the kitchen, where a warm bowl of ramen was waiting for him when he sat down at the table. Itadakimasu, he exclaimed as he began to empty the bowl of contents. The elderly monk laughed, seeing Naruto devour the bowl of ramen with an intensity that rivals his own. He let out a small sigh. The young child can easily and affordably eat ramen, but he still needs to eat other foods, which are currently out of the question due to a lack of money. Before long, he was relishing his own bowl. When they were through, the monk took both bowls and put them in the sink to be cleaned later because, well, he had a promise to keep right now, and if there was one thing the monk was good at, it was keeping his word. Once they were outside the temple, Naruto happily ran around. The young child has so much energy that it seems impossible. It takes them 10 minutes to walk from their modest temple to the park. Even though Naruto was in a good mood, the monk was not, as he doesn't mind that not many people would be at the park today. Nevertheless, Naruto would be disappointed and would not have to endure the severe treatment he has been subjected to. He can hardly ever afford to take Naruto out of his sight for even a split second in case something awful is done. A jealous shinobi from the village broke into the temple during Naruto's first year of care and put his young life in danger. The only reason the infant was not killed was because of the elderly monk's keen senses and constant familiarity with the area. And then there were the occasions when he brought the baby into the village to go shopping or see the Hokage, and every time they would get looks of disgust. Even though Naruto is unaware of the reasons behind the looks they receive, he will eventually learn the truth when the monk determines the young boy is ready to receive it. As they soon arrived at the park, the monk saw that Naruto was feeling a little let down, which didn't surprise him. The monk said, I guess that everyone is at the parade today, Naruto, casting a downward glance at Naruto. Parade? Inquired the young child. There's no parade that he's heard of, but what's that noise coming from Main Street? The monk chose his words carefully to explain to the small child, the parade is honoring the end of a terrible event. Can we go to the parade? The old monk gave in to Naruto's pleas and used his infamous puppy dog expression, which he hates the most when it comes to taking care of children. Naruto's small, smooth hands were taken into his old, rough hands. The bell on the monk's staff rang as they made their way to Main Street. When the monk arrived at the procession, he lifted Naruto up onto his shoulders, but in order to do so, he had to allow the sun to shine on his head and let his hat hang off the back of his neck. Glancing up at the 3-year-old perched on his shoulders, he asked, Can you see? As the young blonde burst into giggles and became enthralled with the parade, he grinned. One that most creatures find appealing and endearing. Naturally, the monk was happy that the spell had worked because it made it easier for them to enjoy the occasion. But something seemed strange to his acute eyes, and as he studied the crowds, he wondered, where are the Hyugas? The aura surrounding the parade seemed disconnected. He can obviously see the members of the different clans in the village, but there is absolutely no way that he could miss a Hyuga, as they are by far the most haughty clan there, followed closely by the Uchiha clan. Who's he? Young Naruto asked, tapping the bald head of his grandfather and pointing to a man waving to the throng of people as he crossed the street. Someone from another village, was all the monk said. Then he leaned over and gave someone a shoulder tap. Excuse, do you know why the Hyuga aren't here today? The individual simply replied, I'm not entirely too sure, but from what I've heard, it's that they are back at their compound because the heiress is turning 3 today. Ah, thank you very much, I will have to give my blessings to her then, the monk admitted, although he wasn't entirely eager to visit the Hyuga compound. He detests arrogant humans, especially ninjas and samurai, and so do other members of his kin. No problem, master, the individual said, giving a slight nod. The monk observed the young man who had just assisted him and thought, a rather respectful young man. His silver hair and sluggish manner were peculiar, but the old monk could tell who he was by his headband and masked face because of his repeated conversations with the Hokage. So this is the young Kakashi, pretty impressive for a young man, he said to Naruto as they prepared to watch the parade together when 2 Anbu materialized behind him. The monk, carrying Naruto on his shoulders with a casual air, had his staff raised in the face of one of them because they had appeared so abruptly. At this, even the youthful Kakashi appeared surprised. What are your 2 desires? The monk inquired, keeping his gaze fixed on the procession. When Naruto realized what was happening, he was accustomed to such things occurring. The taller of the 2 said, we bear a message from Hokage Sama for you, which caused the monk to turn and face them. He would like to speak with you in his office right now, Master Karasu. Karasu, the monk, sighed and then nodded. The 2 Anbu then vanished in a cloud of smoke, and Naruto and Karasu also instantly vanished. Kakashi was obviously surprised despite his mask, clearly taken aback by what had been done. A short while later, the 4 emerged in the Tower of Fire's Hokage's office. In his traditional cage robes, the Hokage stood by the office windows, watching the procession below. With a quick glance back at the 4, Sarutobi nodded to the 2 Anbu, who understood that they were dismissed and disappeared back into the streets. Hello and thank you for coming, Karasu. Sama. I see that you brought little Naruto with you as well, Sarutobi said, turning around and grinning at the sight of Karasu and Naruto. Naruto nodded while laughing on top of his grandfather. He liked the elderly man because of how kind he was to him. As he removed Naruto from his shoulders and placed him on the ground, Karasu said, that I did, but what is so important this time around that you needed to send 2 of your Anbu to fetch both me and my grandson? After pouting for a little while, the young child ran off to find something to entertain himself in a different area of the office. It involves the Hyuga. Surely by now that you know of the status within the clan? The Sandaime Hokage sighed, obviously a little troubled. Karasu nodded. Well, today is young Hinata's 3rd birthday, but today is also going to be terrible for their going too. With a deep regret, Karasu concluded, place one of those disgusting seals that you humans have created to keep control over others of your kind. Yes, I've heard of this, it's not new overall since those of my kin have heard of this long ago. Then you understand why I would like you to come with me to the compound now, Sarutobi said, nodding. That I do understand, but I will only be there to assist you and nothing else, but I will also have to, the monk said, nodding in agreement. Bring Naruto with you, Sarutobi concluded with a smile, and Karasu nodded while glancing down at the young blonde who was tugging on his grandfather's Haori's sleeve at the moment. Then do it, he might have fun there. Karasu said, giving the Hokage a slight scowl. Or as much fun as they will allow with us there, you may have placed that law in effect, but it has still isolated my grandson from others of his age. The Sandaime sighed, seeming to age before Naruto's eyes. Naruto wanted to once more sit on his grandfather's shoulders, despite the fact that it was obvious he had no idea what was being said. I know, I've noticed what happens when you are out trying to have a good time and when he tries to make some friends. But Hinata is also friendless as well due to her upbringing, so they might be able to have some fun together. Besides, Hiyashi isn't like the rest of the clan. Karasu muttered, I've heard, still not enjoying the thought of going there. But he was also a friend of your Yandaime Hokage, so it should be pleasant at least. All right, then we are set to depart, said Sarutobi as he led Naruto, who was once more perched on his shoulders, and the monk out of the tower. The trip to the Hyuga clan compound took the 3 of them roughly 30 minutes. Because of the compound's white walls and large number of guards, which indicate the significance of what is happening within, Karasu was certain that it was the compound. The guards bowed to the Hokage when they saw him, showing respect, but they scowled at the demon and his master. To associate me with demons, would they? Karasu thought as he glared 10 times at the guards, referring to them in truly filthy terms that he had learned of his reputation in the village. The head guard at the entrance said, "We cannot let you enter," his heritage visible in his white eyes. Sarutobi gave the guard a shoulder pat and said, "It's okay, they're with me." Naturally, there are advantages to being close to the village's Hokage, even though everyone appeared to be reluctant to let them both in. The moment the gates slowly opened, they all became aware that the Hyuga's sharp, white eyes were fixed on them. A dangerous hostile air, of course, thought Karasu with a smile, the majority of the Eye's owners being trained in their family's art. One of the clan's obvious branch members approached the trio after glancing at one of the elder members and asked, "Hokage Sama, what did we do to deserve the honor of you blessing us with your presence this day?" With a smile, Sarutobi said, "I am here to see the proceedings of what is about to be performed this day, and to see if I can stop this foolishness within the clan." "We comprehend your reason for being here, Hokage Sama, but what brings them here?" asked an elderly man in the clan. As he placed Naruto back on the ground from his shoulders, Karasu said, "I am only here for 2 reasons. First off, I was going to come by to wish the heiress a happy birthday after hearing about it by the parade thanks to that young lad Kakashi. But upon being called upon by Sarutobi-san, he asked me to merely assist him if a need for me has arisen." "Okay, but why is it here?" A younger member of the clan scowled at Naruto. "My grandson is here with me today since I have no one who is willing to watch him for any length of time. And under the suggestion of Sarutobi-san, I brought him with me," Karasu said, glaring at the young man as if glares could kill. "And what a great idea that was," Hiyashi remarked as he approached to welcome the visitors. Hiyashi said, "I welcome the 3 of you to our humble home. We would feel honored if you let your grandson play with the other children. They rarely get out as it is to play with others of their own age." He then gave everyone who dared to question him an almost imperceptible glare. He motioned to his side, where a small young girl in a pink kimono was hiding behind Hiyashi. "Allow me to introduce my daughter Hinata." His final words were, "Who is turning 3 on this very day? And who may this young man be?" He grinned kindly at Naruto. Naruto thought to himself, "This man is nice," as he emerged from behind his grandfather. The cruel people staring at him were the reason he was there. Karasu casually looked around the gathering, noting that most of the people he looked at turned their heads away. "This young lad is my grandson, Naruto, whom I'm guessing that most of your family already knows about," he said. "Why don't you say hello to the nice girl, Naruto?" "Hello," waved the young blonde and grinned broadly. The young heiress said, "Hello," with shyness. "Well, she's a shy one, isn't she?" Karasu grinned at the way the 2 kids were interacting. "And your grandson possesses a pair of lungs," Hiyashi smiled back. "That was nothing. You should hear him in the morning when he's trying to wake me up for one reason or another." Hiyashi responded, "I'll take your word for it," reaching out a hand to Karasu, who accepted it and shook hands with the head of the clan. "Meeting one like you, Hiyashi-san, is a true honor," Karasu remarked, abruptly releasing the Hyuga's hand. "But I do believe that we all should get down to business and let the children have their fun. It is a party, of course, isn't it?" The head led the monk and the Hokage inside the house and apologized, saying, "It should be, but it's not, unfortunately." As Karasu departed, he took one last glimpse at his grandson, who was playing with Hinata, the young heiress, and a different boy dressed in a black kimono. The 3 of them were playing like kids should, kicking a ball around and laughing as they ran around the yard. The Hokage noticed the slight smile that appeared on Karasu's face. One man who resembled Hiyashi was frowning sorrowfully, despite the fact that the elder clan members who were keeping an eye on the kids were frowning disapprovingly. Karasu was unable to determine what it was, but he surmised that it had something to do with the young child who was giggling and having fun with both Hinata and Naruto. As the meeting continued into the night, things weren't going well for the Hokage or Hiyashi as a whole. They wanted the clan's performance of the cursed seal to be permanently banned from the clan, but the elders' unwavering intransigence prevented this from happening. From what Karasu could gather, this was only a gift for Hizashi, Hiyashi's twin brother, to prevent Neji, his own son, from inheriting the seal. The elderly monk occasionally added his 2 cents to the conversation in an effort to gain the upper hand, but it was all in vain because it seemed the elders were accustomed to having these kinds of conversations. As Karasu left the dining room where the discussion was held, he bitterly thought of the act of turning one's own flesh and blood into a slave. What a stupid custom, the elderly monk murmured. That it's my friend, Sarutobi said, putting his hand on Karasu's shoulder. But one day this practice will end, and it will end forever. I've been battling this practice with the Hyugas since day one of my reign as Hokage before my successor took over, and once I've returned to my seat as Hokage. I'm rather shocked that this clan hasn't changed its ways sooner, but I'm also afraid that both me and my grandson have worn out our welcome for this night, Karasu said with a disappointed shake of his head. The Hokage said to Hiyashi as they emerged into the courtyard, and so have I, but I'm the cage of this village so I have more liberties than that of yourself unfortunately. Well, I must be off. I have paperwork to attend to. Goodbye, my dear friend. Karasu shook Sarutobi's hand. Then the Hokage went out through the gates and vanished into the night's shadows. We really did lose track of time, didn't we, Hiyashi-san? That we did, Karasu. Sama, Hiyashi said, joining the monk as they stood in the night sky. So where do you and Naruto live? He stated, we live in a small temple on the outskirts of the training field that is called the Forest of Death. Hearing a gasp of surprise, Karasu glanced mildly at Hiyashi before turning to face the monk and the revered Hyuga. Is there a problem with that? Hiyashi quickly said, well, it is a dangerous area of course, and to raise a child, while attempting to gather himself. Finishing, Karasu said, like Naruto, there is a good course of action, cutting Hiyashi off. You of course know of his condition, and you probably know more than likely what the foolish people of this village think of him as. The head of the Hyuga clan nodded. Karasu continued after observing that Hiyashi nodded once more. Just think of him living within the village in a day-to-day situation. It would be terrible for one so young and inexperienced in the world to go through. The monk saw that Hiyashi's eyes were as big as dinner plates and decided to go into more detail. That and a nice simple temple is all that we need. He likes being around all the creatures that are around our home, and he gets along well with them. Of course I am there to supervise and to make sure that nothing terrible happens to him. It seemed to Karasu that Hiyashi was planning something when he said, but since it is late and very dark out now, a time of the day which even you should agree with that it isn't safe for your grandson to be out at, why don't you spend the night? Karasu was about to say no after being slightly taken aback by the offer, but he changed his mind and said, we shall, but we will be staying for the night and breakfast before we head out for our home. Hiyashi said, all right, leading the monk through the house. Before long, they found themselves in a room with 3 small children splayed out across the floor. They seemed to have much fun this day. From the shadows in the room, a voice said, yes, they did, my brother. It quickly became clear that it was Hizashi, Hiyashi's twin brother. Would you like to tell us of it? The younger twin shrugged and remarked, they played like children, nothing else. But they seemed to have become friends. That is good, Karasu remarked, amusedly observing the sleeping Naruto. Because the young blonde was happily snoring while stretched out on the floor. I haven't seen my grandson this happy in a long time. As his own daughter slept soundly next to Naruto, Hiyashi remarked, nor have I seen my daughter this happy as well. How did it go? Hizashi inquired, shifting the topic. With a sigh, Hiyashi said, not good at all, and Neji will be receiving the seal tomorrow at noon. Hiyashi then sadly turned to face Neji, who was sleeping next to him, and grew depressed. Hizashi, I am sorry about this, but we couldn't do anything about it. Momentarily, the 2 brothers were silent, but Karasu's cough interrupted them. That it may be, but the effort is what really counts. The elders of this clan are a tough nut to crack, Karasu said. Hizashi said, that they are master, as he got up from the floor and gently shoved Neji off of him. Then he made a bow to Karasu. I thank you for your assistance in this even though you are an outsider of both the clan and the village. Gazing down at the younger twin, the monk questioned, does living here for only 3 short years really mean that I'm an outsider of this village? No matter how long we live in this village, my grandson and I will always be seen as outsiders, even though we've lived here for those 3 years together. The elderly monk appeared to be growing older and more worn out as he spoke these words. Taking Hinata off the ground, Hiyashi thought this was a better opportunity than anything else. He motioned for the monk to follow him. I might as well show you to your room for this night, Karasu. Sama, Hiyashi said. With a nod, Karasu took up his grandson and trailed behind Hiyashi. The adults soon find themselves strolling down the hallways when Hiyashi slides open a door. He went in, put his daughter down on her futon, and gave her a snuggle. When Karasu emerged, he was taken aback to discover that he and Naruto would be spending the night in the room next door. Hiyashi was correct when he slid the door open. There were 2 futons in the center of the floor along with a few other items that Karasu didn't bother looking at just now. This will be your room for the night. I know that it isn't much, but it should fit your needs. With Naruto nestled in his arms, Karasu bowed and said, "Thank you for your kindness, my friend. I don't know how we can repay you for this." The elderly monk was curious when Hiyashi somberly remarked, "You have done more than enough to help us change the ways of our clan this day, and this means more to me than anything else." Karasu nodded, understanding, since Hinata appeared to have had some martial arts training. "The elders of my clan see my daughter as a weakling, and have already started to force me to teach her my family's art. She isn't living up to the standards that they have set upon her due to her being my heiress. And if my wife becomes pregnant once more and the child is apparently more skilled than Hinata, then they will more than likely place the seal upon her. She is only 3, just barely in her toddler years, and they are already trying to turn her into a kunoichi. I am glad that I have chosen to train Naruto once he is a bit older," Karasu said, frowning at this insignificant detail. "What, you haven't even given Naruto any form of training at all yet?" "Of course not, he is still just only a child, and children are supposed to have fun." "I agree with your sentiments exactly, Karasu Sama, but the customs of the clan have to come first apparently, like the seal." With a sigh, Karasu bowed once more and thanked Hiyashi before going into the room and shutting the sliding door. But as he left, Hiyashi felt that something wasn't quite right about what he had done. He thought to himself, he doesn't seem to show his age at all, as he proceeded down the hallway to his room, where he discovered his wife soundly asleep. After placing Naruto on one of the 2 futons and tucking him in, Karasu went over to the window, through which the moon shone brightly. He knelt beside it and took out some beads for prayer. The elderly monk started to pray in silence. Well into the night, and long after Karasu had concluded his prayer, a shadowy figure appeared on the Hyuga clan's compound. Without much difficulty, the figure soon made his way into the estate. His main goals were to take out any guards who might have noticed him and conceal the bodies so that they wouldn't immediately cause alarm. He moved stealthily through the house's hallways, inspecting each room as he went, and eventually came upon a room where an elderly monk and a young, blonde brat were dozing off. The figure said, "Not what I'm looking for," brushing them off as non-threats. The figure moved to the next sliding door and opened it, smiling, "Now that's what I'm looking for." After entering the room and taking up Hyuga Hiyashi's little 3-year-old daughter, the figure quickly left the room and went into the hallway. He was walking quickly and soundlessly in the direction of the exit when he heard some metal objects jingle. The voice said, "What are you doing with the child?" It was old and stern. With a quick look back, the figure saw that it was the monk, with his shakuho by his side. "There's nothing to worry about, old man," the figure said, turning to face Karasu. As he recognized the man in front of him as the Kumogakure no Sato representative, Karasu said, "Pretty cocky for you to be here even though the Konoha and Kumo are no longer at war." The shinobi smirked at the elderly man and laughed vilely, saying, "So what if it is, and now that you know who I am, I'm going to have to kill you." Karasu kept his staff by his side and glared at the younger man in front of him. The monk asked with unexpected calm, "Do you mind telling me what you were planning on doing with the young heiress before you kill me?" "So you want to know what I'm planning, is that right?" the shinobi asked, drawing a kunai. The glare of the man was already grew stronger. "Well, me and the higher-ups in my village are planning on taking her eyes out, old man." With a brief spin of the kunai to create a dramatic effect, the shinobi suddenly lunged towards the elderly monk. Just as the kunai approached the elderly man's face, time appeared to slow down, and then the shinobi's arm began to hurt. The majority of the estate's occupants were startled when he let out an excruciating cry of pain. The shinobi dropped to his knees and lifted the semi-awake Hinata, but all he could do was stare in horror at the elderly man who seemed to treat him like he was nothing at all. The shinobi became curious when he heard metal hitting the wooden floorboards. At that moment, he realized the elderly man had smoothly snapped his wrist by grabbing hold of it. A young voice that Karasu recognized too well said, "What's going on?" Karasu watched the intruder and ordered, "Naruto, take your friend Hinata and get back into the room." He heard the Hyuga's soft footsteps approaching to get a better look at what was happening. After witnessing his grandfather's serious demeanor twice, the young child was able to assist his new friend and be taken back to their room without any major complaints. Though it wasn't as if Naruto wasn't also perplexed, Hinata didn't understand what was going on because he knew his grandfather better than Hinata. The shinobi, trying to will the pain away, whispered to himself, "This isn't over yet," as he slowly reached for another kunai. However, he took a kick to the stomach while doing so, sending him hurtling into the wall across the hallway. He let himself drop to the floor. With a steely tone, Karasu approached the shinobi and said, "It is, for you are outnumbered and outclassed by the one who said you were going to kill." Karasu stood in the same spot and calmly stared at the shinobi, expecting the lone ninja to attack him when he noticed that the shinobi was getting up and drawing out another kunai with his good hand. It would have been an understatement to say that Karasu was taken aback by the shinobi's next move, but in the end, it didn't really matter to him. The shinobi killed himself by driving the kunai into his own heart. Gazing amusingly at the now dead shinobi, Karasu thought to himself, "Fool thinks that he will get away scot-free. He forgot to tell me about his plans, and even that will damage Kumo's reputation." With 5 guards by his side, Hiyashi arrived and demanded to know what was going on. Karasu turned to face him and told him what had happened. In spite of what the shinobi had told the monk, Kumo continued to demand Hiyashi's life over the course of the following few days, claiming that it was all Konoha propaganda. Furthermore, despite the shinobi's body being shown to them, they maintained that it was a fake. A week after these proclamations, Hizashi, Hiyashi's younger twin, was set free from the clan's curse when he offered his life in lieu of his own brother, but abandoning a bitter son who is currently under the same curse. In addition, the elders considered the heiress even worse because of her age because they perceived her attempted kidnapping as a sign of weakness. Karasu was disgusted by the entire ordeal and thought it would be a miracle if he could ever tolerate being around anyone else from the clan except Hiyashi, his wife, and their beautiful daughter Hinata. Karasu was pleased for Naruto even though he was disgusted by the experience because he now had a friend to play and hang out with. As Karasu sipped tea on his porch, overlooking the temple's garden from where he had strategically placed a lacquered table, he couldn't help but smile at Hinata and Naruto playing together in the garden and enjoying their time together. Karasu smiled and finished the last of his tea, slipping on his zori as he stood up. Such pleasant times, he thought to himself. Then, oblivious to the hardships that awaited the 2 young ones, he went outside into the garden with them. The early light was shining warmly over a small, very humble temple near a very dark forest, where a 12-year-old boy was sweeping the porch with a broom. In the daylight, his deep blue eyes could rival the sky's radiance, and his brilliant blonde hair could rival the sun's brilliance. He was wearing nothing but his hakama and basic haori as he swept the porch, complaining to himself about sluggish old men who pray first thing in the morning. Naruto had just finished sweeping when he thought to himself, "Damn it." The young boy was deeply troubled by the attitudes of the village and would not have bothered to enter Konohagakure no Sato if it weren't for his best friend and class. "Well, my morning chores are done, so I might as well get Gramps so we can have some breakfast before I head out for the village," he said. Naruto swiftly returned the broom to its daily resting place in the storage closet before entering the temple and sweeping the porch. As Naruto moved silently through the modest temple, he couldn't help but wonder again why they had to live in such substandard circumstances considering that his grandfather was the best monk in the region. Since the monk gets along so well with the Hokage and Hyuga Hiyashi, the patriarch of the Hyuga, the villagers reluctantly let him carry out his duties, but why? The blond boy entered a room and heard a quiet, soft voice. Probably has to do with how Gramps seems to dislike the busy day-to-day lives of the villagers, he thought to himself. Naruto cautiously opened the door and stepped through the threshold into the room. Then he knelt down behind the old monk who was bowing down to a hanging scroll bearing the image of his grandfather's god, the Dark One, that he only knew by name. Naruto said softly, "Gramps, I've finished my morning chores," keeping his eyes fixed on his grandfather, whose long nose often makes him laugh because it's not at all normal. After concluding his prayer, Karasu got up using his shikuho. "All right, then how about we have some breakfast before you leave for your classes?" he said, nodding as Naruto got to his feet. A short while later, they were enjoying a straightforward breakfast of ramen at the kitchen table. The silence during their meal was short-lived, as Karasu moved his empty bowl aside and fixed his eyes on Naruto. The old monk said, "Naruto, I have something very important to tell," which made Naruto stop eating and hang his noodles. "Don't let food hang from your mouth while I'm talking to you, young man. Better, now what I'm about to say is really not that very important overall, but it has to do with my order." As he took a seat for the 3rd time, Naruto said, "So it's time for the yearly gathering. Am I to go with you this time?" I'm sorry Naruto, but you cannot come with me as you are not a full-fledged member yet, Karasu shot back, shaking his head. However, I've been working really hard to join the order, so why can't I come with you? Naruto asked, narrowing his eyes at his grandfather with the long nose. You have other responsibilities, Naruto, and you have that test coming up which will determine if you are to become a ninja of this village, Karasu said, feeling a little let down by his grandson's forgetting of the one thing he had always wanted to be. Although Naruto's desire to join the order pleased Karasu much, he is still an apprentice and will never be permitted to attend a meeting with the leaders of the various order sects. And if you must so remember Naruto, the head of the order, Sojobo, will turn a most displeasing eye towards both you and myself if I did bring you with me. So, until I become a master, I'm not welcome then, Naruto concluded, ramen. Eating coolly once more. So how long will this gathering last? I'll be leaving today and won't return till the beginning of the next month, Karasu said. As he appeared to almost choke on his breakfast, Naruto thought to himself, and I expect to come back seeing you as a strong young ninja who proudly wears the Hite.8 of Konohagakure. Talk about pressure. You should do well on the graduation test with all that I've taught you and worked on with you. Naruto said, somewhat teasingly, I should if the ninjutsu that I'm going to be tested on isn't Bunshin no Jutsu, which made the old monk flush. Although he learned many skills from his grandfather, including how to control his chakra, ninja arts are not his specialty. Regardless of his level of control, Naruto was never able to create a clone that was even remotely respectable. I'm sure that I will do you proud, grandpiece. My grandson, I have no doubt that you will do just that, Karasu smiled kindly. Even though his grandfather may have been harsh with him, Naruto still loved him, and it was times like these that deepened his love for him. Naruto leaned in the direction of his grandfather and said, but remember these words that I will bestow upon you. Before one can control power, one needs to control himself. Care to elaborate that? Naruto asked, arching an eyebrow. Care to wash the dishes? Not really. Ditto, touche. You will understand those words in due time, grandson, but until then you should be heading out to classes now. Naruto looked at the clock and leapt to his feet, but not before putting on his Zori and racing out of the kitchen and out the front door. Naruto yelled, smell ya later, Gramps, and bolted out the door. Ah, that boy, Karasu muttered, gathering the dishes and then washing them while scratching his bald head. Such an energetic young boy at that. Well, is there anything else that I have to do before I leave? I already told the boys sensei, Uruka, about my whereabouts and Hiyashi.san, Hiruzen, Dono, and Anko. Chan already know of my year trip. So I think that's about it. Naruto crashed through his classroom door a little later that morning, landing face first at his teacher's feet as he strained from the fall. His teacher looked downcast at Naruto and said, thank you for joining us today. Think you can get up and get to your seat before I toss you there myself? Naruto stood up, cleaned himself off, and walked up to his seat, which was next to a pensive little boy who had a fan on the back of his shirt. I think that I can manage, he muttered. Sasuke murmured, way to go with the entrance, Dobi, and Naruto followed. Shut it, Naruto said as he returned stealthily, which led to a blonde girl who heard him hitting him on the back of the head. What was that for Ino? With a tongue out, the girl named Ino said, being mean to Sasuke-kun, glaring at Naruto. Uruka began, today class we're going to be going over, which turned out to be just a recap of what they had already covered in order to be ready for the big test tomorrow. Unfortunately for Uruka, the majority of the class had already passed out. From what he could see, the only two students who had not passed out were Hyuga Hinata and Haruno Sakura. He thus carried on teaching the two girls only. The bell for recess rang, and every student in the room with the exception of Shikamaru, Hinata, and Sasuke could not contain their excitement as they fled the room. However, Naruto could hardly contain himself as he waited for Hinata, his best friend, saying, Hinata, Chan, hurry up, we're going to be late. With a quiet, okay, Naruto.kun, Hinata joined him. Hinata glanced at Naruto as they made their way through the academy and out onto the grounds. Naruto.kun, since the test is tomorrow, would you like to come over and study together after today's classes? Naruto said, I would like to, as soon as they arrived at the location of their fellow cadets. But Gramps told me that I have to check out the top of the Hokage monument since there have been some strange things going on around it as of late. Hinata just said, oh, when she at last noticed something intriguing in the earth. Naruto put his arm around her shoulders and said, "But I'll come as soon as I'm done with that," oblivious to the redness that was all over her face. "Huh, Hinata. Chan, your face is red, are you feeling okay?" "Yes, I am fine. Well, let's have some fun before heading back for class," Hinata said with a slow smile, nodding slowly and feeling a little upset about his incoherence. "Hell yeah," Naruto cried out as he launched himself into a sprint to catch up to Hinata, who had taken off running. "Hey, wait up for me." Iruka thought to himself, such innocence, as he peered out of his classroom and down at his pupils in the courtyard. No matter how many times this day comes, I will always wish that it never did come. An old voice spoke from the doorway. "The innocence that you seem to know is nothing but an illusion of the true innocence that they once had." Iruka turned around and saw it was the Hokage. "May I join you, Iruka?" "Yes, Hokage." "Sama." Iruka gestured by the window in response. "What do I owe for the honor to be in your presence today, Hokage?" "Sama. I was just merely walking around the academy and wanting to see how the children are doing," said the elderly gentleman. "So you wanted to ditch the paperwork, you could say that." "Okay, but what did you mean when I was talking about their innocence?" "Iruka, the only true moment of innocence is when each and every one of us are born into this world. It is at that moment that every being, no matter what species they may be, is innocent. And from that day, our innocence fades away. So this day doesn't harm their innocence at all, for it has been fading away each and every day." Then the elderly gentleman's face became darker. For some of them lost all of their innocence on the day that they were born, or the rest of their innocence in one traumatic event. The Hokage nodded and asked, "You are referring to both Naruto and Sasuke? Then by going by your words, then you are right. The innocence that Naruto shows is but a shadow of its former self. And Sasuke, he has none at all. Is there something wrong, Hokage? Sama?" "Nothing. But the innocence that you see coming from Naruto is just the very last bits of it which were saved by his grandfather, Karasu. Dono. And bits and pieces of it also come from the young Hyuga girl, Hinata." "But how did Karasu Sama save his innocence, and how is parts of it Hinata's?" Iruka asked, his confusion evident. The Hokage clarified, "Karasu Dono saved the last remnants of it by taking him under his care that day all those years ago," and Iruka's face slightly saddened upon learning the day. "But as for Hinata's part, it is part of her being, for she is by far the most innocent of them all down there. And by being Hinata's friend, then Naruto has some of it as well. Then what about Sasuke? People have been there for him, trying to help him and such." The Hokage's expression widened. "That boy is a loose cannon despite his grades and seemingly loyal behavior. For I have no doubt in my mind that if given the chance to strike down his brother, he will hurt those closest to him. Death clouds his thoughts all day and night. He will do anything and everything to reach his goal. I've asked Karasu Dono to see him many times, and each time he refused his help. The boy's ambitions will not want to be trifled with in the years to come." "Hokage Sama," Iruka stammered out, surprised to hear his superior speaking of a little child. "Surely, he can be tempered even though he is still young and not even a ninja yet?" The Hokage began to leave the room, saying, "Iruka, that boy, if pushed slightly in one direction, will do what I have said." The Hokage left the room after saying, "Remember what I have told you this day and hour, Iruka, for these are truths that not even you, their teacher, was able to learn despite that you have been teaching them for all these years." Iruka thought to himself, so odd, as he observed all of the joyful kids who were going to take the test. Looking up at the sun through the window, Iruka grinned. Yet it is a truth in the world, like everything that has a beginning will eventually end. Death is at the end of every life, but that just means that we have to make the best of our lives and live them to the fullest. Mizuki, the young monk.in training, was sitting on the edge of the academy's room, staring down at the children. His grades are good, but they won't get him a passing grade. In addition, he needs to be able to answer some questions correctly. Questions that only the most intelligent but unpractical students could ever be able to answer. Furthermore, the teacher believed that he has not yet demonstrated his capacity for such skill. With a menacing smile on his face, he vanished in a cloud of smoke, declaring, "Power will be mine." Sasuke looked at each and every one of his classmates and thought, "What fools." His thoughts were interrupted when two of his biggest fangirls grabbed hold of him and began fighting over him. "They will get in my way, and if they do," he said. After all of the classes ended that day, Naruto and Hinata strolled until they arrived at her house. It didn't take long because they soon ran into someone. Hinata. Sama, the elder cousin of the Hyuga heiress, called out. You are home and well, I see. Hinata hesitantly said, yes, Neji. Nissan, and bowed slightly. Naruto-kun was with me, of course, as you can see. Neji turned around and walked away, saying, that I do, to a location that neither of the cadets knew. Naruto muttered in a displeased tone, what a pleasant way of saying hello, which made Hinata laugh. No, really, Hinata, he has such a way with saying hello to you that it's as if he wants to really hurt. Hinata frowned and nodded, voicing her thoughts, I know he does. Observing her best friend's concerned look, Hinata smiled softly and put her hand on Naruto's shoulder. Don't worry, he won't do anything like that unless the conditions were just fine. You know that, of course, anyway. Yes, but I'm still not fond of it, Naruto remarked, beginning to move away. Anyway, I'll see you later once I've finished the job. See ya later, Hinata-chan. Hinata yelled back, later Naruto-kun, observing his regressing form. She couldn't help but worry that he might be overqualified for this job. Naruto arrived at the temple quickly and collected his belongings, which included a conical straw hat, a shakuho with only 2 rings, a few talismans, and a shakuhachi. Well, I'm ready, he said to himself as he emerged from the temple, carrying a pouch that held talismans and his flute. His shakuho was being used as a walking stick, and his hat covered his eyes. He looked at the sun, which was approaching twilight with every minute, and said, I wish that I could have brought Hinata-chan with me. Though he wished for it, he knew deep down that his grandfather wouldn't have it allowed and that it wasn't in her best interest. This is probably just a minor spirit causing some trouble or something of the like, he said. Ninjas walk a dangerous path. Monks do too, but their costs are even greater in a more spiritual sense. Naruto began his search for his target as he made his way through the village and to the top of the monument. I can feel traces of something here, but I can't exactly tell what it is, the sun said, still rising. Of course, something is up here. It was sensed right down to his bones. Naruto spent some time exploring the monument before coming upon something, a tiny blue blob. With a staff end poke, the young monk felt it was so out of place. It moved a little, softly, then shivered and turned to look at Naruto. It appeared to be a teardrop that extended up to Naruto's shin, and oddly enough, it had 2 bright eyes on its face. It even gave him a smile. You have to be the one causing all of the trouble up here, Naruto said, drawing back his staff. He could tell that something wasn't natural even though it appeared to be rather silly. It also appeared pretty frail without arms or legs. A terrible chill went down his spine before he could drive it away. The being in front of him was staring at something behind him. Naruto turned around slowly as he heard a growl and saw 2 small humanoid creatures with long, cunning faces and green bodies. Goblins, Naruto thought to himself as he put down his instrument and raised his staff in a fighting stance. He had battled goblins in the past, but his grandfather had been present to supervise him. He's now alone and up against 2 club-wielding goblins. As they charged at him, Naruto cackled and smiled maniacally, stepping back to deflect the first blow with his staff. He was already small, and these guys were half that, so it would be difficult to hold them off. Naruto dodged both of the attacks, spun away, and swiftly threw the 2 talismans, one after the other, to the ground. The goblins were about to launch another powerful attack, but they abruptly stopped as though they had run into a wall. Naruto finally stopped channeling chakra to the 2 talismans as they pushed themselves off of the invisible wall and smacked it a few times to get through. Naruto stumbled forward and swung his staff low, sending one of the goblins flying. It collided with a neighboring tree. Luckily, the other one fell flat on its face, avoiding Naruto's next swing. Sadly for the goblins, the strange creature chose that exact moment to attack the goblin that had fallen. Slamming its soft body down on the goblins wasn't much of anything. When Naruto saw this, he threw down 2 more talismans, making sure that the 4 were equally spaced apart. He just happened to catch the strange creature that was thrown at him by chance as he glanced up. Finally, the other goblin who had crashed into a tree returned to the battle. Regretting his decision to tuck the squishy creature inside his shirt, Naruto adjusted his position. The one on the ground started to charge the young monk, but an invisible wall stopped it again. Smashing its club against the barrier once more, it attempted to escape when the club did eventually manage to do so, but it rose back up as soon as it did. The other goblin charged at it just as it was about to smash it again, bringing them both face first into contact with the barrier. Naruto murmured, "This should do it," as he set his staff down and started to break through several hand seals. The talismans glowed and a voice spoke, "O malevolent spirits! I beseech you to return to the other world from which you came." With all of his might, Naruto focused his attention on the goblins as they desperately attempted to break free of the trap, saying, "If not, then I guess banishment is good enough for you." Beneath their feet, a bright light matching the talismans began to glow, and then it shot up toward the sky. The goblins were gone, and nothing was left inside the trap. When Naruto realized this, he collapsed onto his back as fatigue overcame him. Before sleep finally got the better of him, he thought, "Geez, the 4-barrier trap is draining enough as it is, but sending off 2 at the same time." After a few hours of rest, Naruto saw the sun rising in the east when he woke up. "Shit," he yelled as he hurriedly gathered his belongings and dashed back into the village to his destination. As he was working, he became aware that the odd being had vanished. Hinata was depressed as she sat in the classroom because Naruto had not shown up the night before as he had promised. Miserably staring out the window at the Hokage monument, she wondered what happened, Naruto-kun, and wondered what had become of her best friend. She had genuine concerns for Naruto, but she is unsure of the reason. She soon questioned out loud, "Naruto-kun, where are you?" which attracted the attention of Kiba and a few other students. The young Inuzuka sat down next to Hinata and remarked, "It's likely that the stupid monk fled knowing that he would never be a ninja. Besides, he has the worst ninjutsu skills out of everyone in our class." Hinata stumbled out, "That's not true. Naruto-kun is good and would never run away from this test." "Oh yeah," Kiba grinned in a way that truly infuriated Hinata. "Then prove it." Something said, "She doesn't need to." That wasn't Kiba. Kiba's eyes suddenly widened to the size of dinner plates as she glanced to his side. When the hell did you get here?" Naruto calmly said, "About 2 seconds before I decided to make my presence known, before moving to the other side of the desk and taking a seat across from Hinata. Sorry about last night, Hinata-chan, but the job took more out of me than what I was expecting." Hinata nodded, sensing that Naruto was partially telling the truth. In addition, he had a dirty, worn-out appearance. The faint rumbles in his stomach are also audible to her. "You missed both breakfast and dinner?" "Yes," the novice monk replied, setting his equipment down by the desk. "The job was different than the rest and that was for sure. I'll have to tell Gramps about it once he comes back from his trip to that gathering for the order." "Hey, you know I'm still here," Kiba growled, giving Naruto a fierce look. Naruto glanced mildly at the other cadet, who would have attacked him if their senseis hadn't entered the room at that exact moment. "We do, but we were too busy talking about things that don't involve you, dog breath," he muttered. Whispering, "This isn't over yet," Kiba kept his scowl directed at Naruto. "Not over by a long shot." When Naruto answered, "Whatever," Hinata looked over at her best friend with a worried expression on her face. Mizuki said, "Okay class, all you need to do in order to pass the test is," as Iruka entered the back room. There was silence, no sounds, but Iruka imagined that he heard someone gulp nervously toward Naruto. "Is perform a simple bunshin no jutsu and answer some questions. We will call each and every one of you one at a time to thoroughly test each of you. Is there any question?" Naturally, he appeared to be in pieces, and Kiba was grinning and enjoying Naruto's evident anguish. Sakura noticed that Hinata was now giving her best friend a nervous, sideways glance, which made her think, "Oh how cute, Hinata is worried about that loser Naruto." Glancing at Naruto idly, Shikamaru thought to himself, "What are you going to do, Naruto?" Although he found the guy annoying, he didn't detest him as much as the rest of the class did, and his parents respected Naruto because of the path he is taking. They claim that based on their experiences, the dangers that ninjas encounter on a daily basis are essentially commonplace events that can happen to anyone, for any reason, at any time. Being both combines both paths together, but the risks of becoming a monk are greater because it deals with matters on a spiritual level. "You don't even look prepared to take this stupid test anyway," the person said, and it's true that the young monk appeared exhausted, even if the dirt covering his body didn't give away how the blonde was feeling at the moment. "Naruto-kun," Hinata murmured to Naruto in concern. "Don't worry, Hinata-chan, everything will be fine," the young blonde said with a smile. Hinata became even more anxious because she could tell he was trying to hide his nervousness. "Why won't you tell me your feelings, Naruto-kun?" Hinata sighed to herself. "We are friends, right?" Each student went into the back room as Mizuki began yelling names, and a few minutes later they all emerged, proudly sporting Konoha-8. Naruto felt a wave of dread as the list began to shorten. He knows that he was completely unfit for this test following that bizarre event from last night, but he doesn't want to let his grandfather, the one who raised and looked after him, down. Even in his hour of greatest need, he was there. Hinata was called up first because her name was near the top of the list, and she quickly emerged with her Hite.8. But now that she was gone, Naruto was anxious and perplexed. She said, "Naruto-kun, I know that you can do it," with a kind smile that seemed to warm him from the bottom of her heart. Kiba, who was next on the list after Hinata, remarked, "Like the loser can even do it," as he stood up. She looked at Kiba and said, "Don't listen to him, Naruto-kun. If he can do it, then you can too." Did Hinata-chan just glare at Kiba? Thought Naruto, his eyes wide. Naruto nodded and said, "Hell yay, if dog breath can do this, then I can easily do this, with greater assurance than before." "Stop talking, Dobi," Sasuke growled at the monk. "If you think that you can pass this test, then you are in for a rude awakening when you will finally realize that you will never become a shinobi. People like you don't deserve to become a shinobi." "Bastard," Naruto glared at Sasuke with a growl. However, since most of the girls in the room are members of Sasuke's fan club, they glared at him as he said that. Regretfully, Naruto's turn arrived quickly, after all of his classmates had sat down in the classroom donning their Hite.8. He moved slowly at first, but as he went, he dreaded every step. For what felt like an eternity, his hand was hovering over the doorknob. He stood in front of the door, staring at what was on the other side and gulping. The door flew open and a hand reached out to grab him before he could really think about it. These actions were so abrupt that he was unable to respond at all. Blinking repeatedly in an attempt to readjust his eyes to the dimness of the room, Naruto soon realized that Mizuki and Iruka were seated behind a table, behind which sat one more Hite-eater. Naruto sat down in the chair in front of the desk and nervously looked back and forth between Mizuki, Iruka, and the Hite-ates. Mizuki said, "Naruto, this is your test," wearing an odd smile. "You have to answer a few questions and then perform a Bunshin no Jutsu." Curious, Naruto wondered why Mizuki was talking so much. "Iruka, Sensei is the one giving the test, isn't that right?" Mizuki smirked and said, "Ah, is there a question that plagues your mind, Naruto?" The young boy said, Isn't Iruka Sensei the one who is going to be giving the test?" Iruka nodded as well, which seemed a little strange to Naruto. "I'm sorry, Naruto, but due to your relationship with Iruka-san, it would be unfair to all of the other students," Mizuki said. "Is there anything else? Good, then let us begin." Just a few questions were asked at the beginning of the test, and, surprisingly, Naruto answered them all correctly. Sakura and Shikamaru were the only other students who failed. However, the true significance of the test lies in its Bunshin no Jutsu section. Naruto managed to survive with 2 Bunshins, despite their lack of wealth. Repressing a grin of satisfaction, Mizuki realized that she had failed Naruto on that particular section and that in order to pass, one would also need to pass the test's ninjutsu section. Perhaps it wouldn't have mattered much in a typical exam, but the teacher was biased and Naruto was the one taking it. The young monk.in training was unaware of this. And all the while, Iruka just looked languidly at Naruto without saying anything. "I apologize to Naruto, but you have not succeeded," Mizuki stated coolly, as though he had anticipated this. "Even the person with the lowest grades in the class passed with flying colors, but I guess with learning on how to be monk affected the outcome of this test." A depressed Naruto sadly thought, I can't believe this, all the hard work that both Gramps and me did. It will be one of the times he hates to disappoint his grandfather." Mizuki noticed Naruto's gloomy face and, "Wait a minute Naruto, but due to the condition of you training to be a monk as well as a ninja, we are willing to give you a second chance since it could affect your skills overall. So we're going to administer a more practical test for you." After a few minutes, Naruto left the rear chamber without taking out his Hite.8, but his expression was solemn. And he flashed that silly smile as he climbed up to his desk next to Hinata. She worriedly said, "Is everything all right, Naruto-kun?" To which Naruto simply nodded in agreement. Despite the fact that she could see with her Byakugan that he had failed, she also couldn't help but wonder why Iruka Sensei seemed a little strange when it came to chakra after noticing that Mizuki had said something to Naruto. The class was dismissed after the two senseis returned to the room, but not before they were instructed to return for an orientation in 1 week. The class bolted from the building and into the waiting arms of their relatives. Despite the fact that young Naruto was not present, Hyuga Hiyashi supported Hinata and did the same for Naruto, even though Naruto failed. He grinned and said, "Next time you'll get it for sure," to the young blonde who seemed to be up to something. Hiyashi was certain that the boy was up to something despite his inability to discern what it was, given his years of experience having the young boy as a family friend. Though she kept it to herself, Hinata had the same thoughts as she watched Naruto depart the school grounds while holding a flute in his mouth and donning a straw hat. As he walked, he was walking to a rather depressing tune. Hinata. The young heiress stammered, "Yes, Oto-san," because she hadn't heard his tone in a while. Hiyashi said, "Go to him and see what you can do to help him," as he began to walk out of the yard. He was never one to disappoint Karasu. "Don't know, but he needs a friend now more than ever." "What?" As he vanished into Konoha's streets, the elder Hyuga added, "Just make sure that he doesn't do anything stupid." She was confused about what to do, while one, far stronger part of her was screaming at her to go see Naruto and follow her father's instructions. The other part assured her that he was fine. She took off after her closest pal. She was able to follow him primarily by his song and was able to catch up to him quickly because she knew where he would be going. However, she chose to remain in the shadows and begin to follow him rather than approaching him. Naruto abruptly stiffened up and looked to the side of the road, where Hinata was, about halfway to the small temple. He called out, "Come on out, I know you're there." She was about to leave when something else beat her to the point where she was trying to swallow but had a lump in her throat. It was in. "What the?" she muttered softly as her bewildered eyes fixed on the strange creature. In addition, the beast unexpectedly leapt onto Naruto and landed on his head. The young blonde yelled, "You again," while attempting to remove the creature from himself. Hinata approached the young blonde, blinked for a few moments in bewilderment, and then walked out into the light and onto the path, removing the creature from his head. Naruto stood up from the ground and said, "Thanks Hinata-chan, I owe you one." He knew this look Hinata was giving Naruto, and it never really worked out for him when Hinata looked like this. Hinata was just kind of staring at him. She turned to face the strange white furred creature in his hands and asked, simply, "Why did you leave? You seemed pretty content about failing the test." He answered in Hinata's same tone, "It's just a test." "It may be, but you were working so long and hard for the test." "I know, but second chances do happen," Naruto said, his eyes widening. "Shit, I said too much," he thought to himself. Merely raising an eyebrow in perplexity, Hinata let it drop and returned the creature to the earth. Her mood changed so quickly. If Naruto hadn't known her for so long, he would have been surprised. "So do you want to hang out?" she asked. He then quickly led Hinata and the strange creature to the location of the temple, saying, "Sure, my place is up the road anyway." Despite being somewhat perplexed as to why the creature was following them in the first place, Naruto decided to let it go. For the time being, Naruto said, "So what can I get you?" as he stepped into the temple and removed his shoes. Hinata followed suit and went with him to the kitchen, passing by the closest where Naruto had left his belongings. "It would be nice to have some green tea," she said, stepping out onto the kitchen porch that opens into the garden. The young novice monk said, "All right then," as he began to prepare some tea. "So why are you here and not celebrating with your family?" She said, simply, "I wanted to spend the afternoon with you," deftly sidestepping the fact that her father had instructed her to be with him. Naturally, she wanted to be with him, but until her father gave her the push, she wasn't sure what to do. Hinata sagged a little as Naruto merely said, "So you're worried about me?" She was quite certain that she would have avoided getting caught for it. Naruto took a seat in front of her on the porch and handed her a cup of tea. He let out a sigh. "Look Hinata-chan, seeing you here really isn't that big of a surprise, but honestly I'm fine. I'm going to become a ninja like you and everyone else in our class later." She quickly inquired, "How later?" while sipping her tea. His calm words, "Soon enough," came as he looked directly into her eyes. Unexpectedly, his eyes widened when he asked, "Does that have to do with what Mizuki-sensei told you after you failed your test? I was watching you while you were taking the test Naruto-kun." "Yes it does, but don't tell anyone else, since no one but myself or Mizuki-sensei are supposed to know about it. That and old man Hokage." "Is that so?" "It is," That sounds a little fishy, she said, setting down her cup. She caught Naruto off guard just as he was about to object. Naruto-kun. I know that you don't want to disappoint Karasu-san, but would he be more disappointed if you did something stupid or something terrible? The young blonde simply scoffed at his best friend's statement, like I would do something that the old man doesn't even know about anyway. Turning her back on Naruto and staring out at the garden, Hinata said, Look, Naruto-kun, I'm just getting a bad feeling from Mizuki Sensei, and Iruka Sensei seemed off as well today. The young blonde gave her a perplexed look. Iruka Sensei appeared to have too little chakra that was slowly flowing, and it even seemed like he wasn't even touching anything at all as he moved. Naruto couldn't help but nod, realizing that he had also observed this. He turned to face the garden and stood up, saying, But I have something to do. He and his grandfather put a lot of effort into this plot of land, transforming it into the lovely area that the two preteens were standing in front of. I can't turn away from what I have to do. I must keep moving forward, even if it is bad and the consequences may be terrible. Did Karasu-san teach you that? Yes, Gramps taught me that. That is pretty smart, but are you really willing to go through with whatever you have to do for the second chance? I must live with what is done and what happens. We are all bounded by that, even the very planet itself. That made no sense at all. The monk looked sheepish and said, I know, while scratching the back of his head and feigning a weak smile at Hinata, who merely shook her head and smiled amusingly. Well, what would you like to do? As Hinata opened her mouth to respond to Naruto, she burst out laughing at what had happened to him. Despite its size, the strange creature from before managed to enter the garden and tackle Naruto to the ground. Now, it is rubbing its face mercilessly on the boy's face. Hinata thought it looked adorable as she watched the scene. The young boy immediately began pursuing the strange creature after it had left him. Hinata even joined the chase, but only after calming down. Otherwise, she would have been giggling the whole time. She giggled as she pursued Naruto alongside him, while her friend laughed and the strange creature grinned widely. They spent hours upon hours playing games with one another until nightfall. However, by that time, the three had entered the temple, where Hinata was dozing off on a futon that Naruto had set for her and the strange creature. He studied her sleeping form silently, then left the room and gathered his belongings from the nearest. The sound of something behind him made him stiffen. He looked over his shoulder and saw it was the strange creature, so he disregarded it and grabbed his belongings from the closest. Naruto stepped forward to the front door, put on his Zori, and stepped out into the night sky. While he was doing this, the strange creature crept into Hinata's room and began to rub against her face, causing the young Hyuga heiress to wince in response. Taking in her surroundings, she quickly deduced that it was nighttime and that she was in the temple's well-known guest room. As soon as Hinata left the room and surveyed the temple, she sensed a problem. Where's Naruto-kun? She asked herself. However, she gasped as she approached the front door, put on her own pair of Zori, and dashed out into the night air. There's a lot of panicked breathing coming from a darkened Hokage tower hallway. One figure was on the ground, surrounded by a pool of blood, and the other stood alone, staring wide-eyed at the Sandaime Hokage. Naruto thought to himself, okay, I managed to knock him out, but why was he curious as to why I am here? Doesn't he know about the test? He employed a basic jutsu that he had invented when he learned about his grandfather's hidden pastime, which involved frequenting the neighborhood bathhouses. Strange as it may seem, Naruto discovered that his colleague and grandfather were strangely laughing while snooping on a few ladies. Naruto joined them because he had no idea what they were doing at the moment, but he quickly recoiled in shock and felt blood drip from his nose. He quickly noticed that the older men also had blood streaming down their noses as he glanced over at them. The older men didn't even realize Naruto was acting in this way until they heard a tiny pop sound and a husky voice because they were so engrossed in what they were doing. As Karasu turned around, blood spurted out of his nose, knocking him out cold from the blood loss. However, Pervy Monk, the other monk, leapt onto the transformed Naruto and tackled him. However, in an instant, the elder men slapped Naruto, causing his jutsu to be instantly dropped. The young monk is still aware of the penalty the older men meted out to him for playing such a ruse. Thankfully, he never showed Hinata this either, but in order for it to affect the Hokage. Naruto murmured to himself, it might be too effective, as he walked over the unconscious man and into his office. A few minutes later, he emerged from the room with an enormous scroll strapped to his back. He yelled, okay, off to the meeting place. As he leapt out of a window and into the night, but because he was so focused on getting away, he missed the shadow that was silently laughing to itself as it observed what he was doing. Another shadow caught sight of him, but she gasped in disbelief when she realized Naruto had emerged from the Hokage tower through a window carrying a large scroll that she was fairly certain wasn't the young monk's. The aforementioned shadow then began pursuing Naruto. While Naruto was being pursued by the shadow, news of what Naruto had done spread like wildfire throughout the village, causing a roar of noise. It would take Hinata approximately an hour to locate Naruto in a forest clearing near an ancient, dilapidated shack. The young blonde was surprisingly good at hiding his tracks, and her eyes could only see so far. He was exhausted and unkempt, with a big scroll spread out in front of him, but he had the most peculiar smile. Hinata approached Naruto with caution and quickly took a cross-legged seat in front of him. "Hello, Naruto-kun," she said. "What are you doing here and what's with that scroll?" Naruto looked at Hinata, his confused blinking belying his lack of awareness that she was standing in front of him. He said, "Well, Mizuki. Sensei said that I could become a genin if I could learn at least one jutsu on this scroll, but he quickly regretted it when he heard someone approaching them from above. He looked up and started to get very anxious." Hinata gasped as she looked up and saw this, saying, "Mizuki, Sensei." "Naruto, what did I tell you about revealing your mission's objectives?" The man glared at Naruto. "You leaked valuable information that led to the downfall of the mission, so you fail." Naruto stood up and exclaimed, "But I learned something from the scroll and it's only Hinata-chan. She's my friend and I know that I can trust her." Mizuki whispered, "But I can't," and Naruto heard her. Before the two kids realized what had happened, Mizuki had his big shuriken raised and was behind Hinata. "And she needs to be removed along with the demon." As a result, Mizuki's flat shuriken caused Hinata to suffer a severe loss of consciousness, allowing her to enter the world of dreams. He struck out at Naruto with the sharp edges of the shuriken, unlike how he dealt with Hinata. "Now it's your turn, little demon fox." But Naruto's staff blocked his forward thrust, stopping it in its tracks. "Take this." Mizuki gave Naruto a vicious knee to the stomach, causing a gasp of pain to be heard throughout the clearing. The teacher attempted to throw Naruto to the ground, but instead just succeeded in pushing him down. With a foot planted firmly on the young monk's chest to restrain him, Mizuki readied his shuriken for the final strike. "Why?" Naruto exclaimed through his agony as he could hardly make out Mizuki's face against the night's shadows. "Why are you doing this?" "There are two reasons why I'm doing this, demon," Mizuki said, smiling at the boy who had fallen. "One is because I seek power, the kind of power that a senin possesses." "And what's the other reason?" The young boy looked confused, so Mizuki gave him a sadistic smile and said, "I'll be called a hero when I head back to Konoha. The man who slew the beast that the great Yondaime Hokage, the yellow flash of Konoha, failed to accomplish. So you honestly don't know then, do you? That stupid grandfather of yours didn't tell you at all?" "No one calls my grandfather stupid," Naruto snarled, attempting to dislodge the larger man. That was when Mizuki gave a dark laugh. Mizuki's voice became smug, something that Naruto despises, much like his grandfather Karasu. "I can't believe this. Even the stupid old monk abided to the stupid law that Hokage Sama instated. This is too good to be true," Mizuki exclaimed, looking down at Naruto. "Well, let me tell you this. Have you ever wondered why everyone looks at you eyes so filled with hatred?" Naruto said, nodding slowly, "That's because I'm not just following the way of the ninja." Mizuki yelled, "Wrong," while planting his foot firmly on Naruto's abdomen. "It's because you are a demon. The very demon that killed the Yondaime, the greatest of all the Hokages. He couldn't kill you but managed to give you the body of a child so that we can slay you. Hokage Sama didn't want to see you dead because you managed to make him believe that you were just a boy. And if it wasn't for that meddling grandfather of yours, you would have been dead long ago." Mizuki was delighted to witness the agony in the eyes of the child. "No, no, no," was all Naruto could say, unwilling to accept the truth of what the Chunin was stating. However, he knew deep down that what he was saying was accurate because it made perfect sense. Naruto encountered other monks over the years who were revered for their abilities rather than despised for mastering the ninja arts. They also didn't experience any torture from the very first day they can recall. Naruto exclaimed, "You lie. Gramps would have told me. He would have told me," as tears started to fall from his eyes. He got Naruto there, of course. Otherwise, he would have killed him by now rather than just torturing him. Ah, but I'm not lying, Naruto-kun, because if I was, what would be the purpose of me telling you this now? He said. When Naruto finally realized this, he stopped wriggling under the teacher's weight. A different voice said, "Oh, giving up now are we, Naruto-kun? That isn't like you at all. If Karasu-san saw you like this, he would be very disappointed with you." Mizuki snapped his head at the voice's origin and saw the dark silhouette of a small man, a small monk, to be exact, wearing a gasa. "Who are you?" "Pervy monk," Naruto exclaimed in shock as he recognized the well-known figure of his grandfather's friend, who appeared to be amused by the moniker. "What are you doing here?" "I should be asking you that, Naruto-kun, and is this a friend of yours? Anyway, allow me to make a correction, the full statement. Kyuubi wasn't sealed into the form of a child. He was sealed inside of one. You are the jailer of the demon. You're next after I kill this demon, old man," Mizuki yelled, striking Naruto in the face with the shuriken. He was in excruciating pain from his butt. Peering over his shoulder, he noticed an odd black fox biting his rear end. What the? Naruto only needed this diversion before slamming his staff into the elder man's head. The Chunin was slightly dazed by the hit, but not sufficiently so to fall off. Mizuki failed to notice Naruto's shadowed expression as he battled to defeat the strange fox and get rid of him. He said in a low voice, "I will not lose to scum like you," and gave Mizuki such a fierce look that it stopped the older man cold long enough for Naruto to throw Mizuki off of him. "Now I'll make you regret ever having me steal the scroll of seals." The strange fox disappeared as soon as it appeared, and Mizuki brashly exclaimed, "Oh yay, I can easily take whatever you throw at me, little demon." Naruto made a hand seal and roared, "How about 1,000 of me?" A violent flash of his chakra caused the clearing to explode with innumerable replicas of the little boy. The older monk exclaimed, "Amazing," as what he saw really impressed him. "I knew you had it in you, kid." Mizuki stumbled, "What the, Kage Bunshin," realizing he was surrounded by over 100 Narutos. "So, are you ready now?" the smirky Naruto asked. "Because I know that I am." "Mommy," Mizuki muttered softly, his eyes as big as dinner plates, before the hundreds of Narutos mercilessly battered him into submission. After the one-sided beating, Mizuki was a bloody mess with intermittent twitches. After the beating, Naruto stood over the broken man as the clones vanished in a cloud of smoke. Standing up from his seat on the ground, the elderly pervy monk was clapping and saying, "Very good, Naruto, very good indeed. I see that you have improved greatly." However, he stopped when he saw Naruto glaring at him. "Now what's with that look? You also had knowledge, didn't you?" Naruto mutely uttered while raising his shakuho. "There's not much that I don't know, kid," said the short old man, nodding. "Then is it true?" "Yes," the elderly man sighed in response. "Then why didn't he tell me?" "Because he felt that you weren't ready to know such information yet." "Why did he feel that way then if he knew?" "Kit, how about I ask you a question?" sighed pervy monk. The younger monk said nothing, but asked, "What would you have done if your own grandchild had a being of such power and hatred sealed inside them?" "See my point. It's not one that anyone would like to talk about." "Fine. But why are you back in town?" The elderly man approached Hinata and said, "Your grandfather asked me to check on you while he is away on his trip to meet with those of the order. Such a pretty vixen you have here, kid. What's her name?" "Hinata." Naruto bowed down beside her in response. "Will she be fine?" Pervy monk turned around, faced Mizuki, and wrinkled his nose. "A bump on the head is all she has and will feel when she wakes up, kid," he said. "Tainted by a snake, I see. What should we do with Mizuki?" "Sensei," pervy monk lifted the Chunin over his shoulders and said, "Let Sarutobi-san handle him. He did break a few laws this night, of course." Naturally, it was amusing to see a little man, who was only slightly shorter than Naruto, lifting someone who is much taller. Naruto sighed and gathered his belongings before strapping the scroll of seals onto his back. "Same old pervy monk," he said. When he had done so, he lifted Hinata into his arms and started to walk back to the village with his grandfather's friend. Much later that day, it would be revealed that Naruto had escaped with his life sentence and was a proud alumnus of the Konoha Ninja Academy, while Mizuki had received a life sentence. Additionally, it was found that one of the messengers came upon Iruka, who was imprisoned in his own closest by a strong genjutsu, while the others were dispatching messages to the ninjas of the village to locate Naruto. That day, Hinata remained at home with Naruto by her side to ensure her well-being following the entire ordeal. The council's customary frowns intensified to a new degree when word of her involvement in the event reached them. During this period, Naruto also thought back on the new information about himself that everyone had withheld from him, including his own grandfather. At first he thought it was absurd, but now that the pervy monk was there, it made more sense. In retrospect, he was also overcome with the feeling that, in spite of this latest development, his grandfather had been gradually enlightening him about his role as the world's most evil jailer. Before one can control power, one needs to control himself. Perhaps, just possibly, Gramps was getting me ready for this. A week has passed since Karasu got back to Konoha. It has been a week since he learned of Mizuki's scheme and the specifics of Naruto's ninja career. Naruto departed for the Wave Country 3 weeks ago. The elderly man was uncomfortable, and he had been since departing for his journey over a month ago after learning of some updates from a friend he asked to inquire about Naruto. The old monk did not enjoy hearing most of the news, particularly the one about his grandson falling for a trick and becoming a pawn in someone else's plan. He put Hinata in danger in addition to himself. As he strolled through the marketplace, he couldn't help but reflect on the circumstances and wonder if he had played a significant role in what had transpired. With many years of experience under his belt, he can acknowledge to himself that he might have put too much pressure on his highly intelligent grandson to pass the test and become a ninja. But he didn't think he would have to tell the boy about the demon sealed inside of him for a few more years, or until he thought the boy was old enough to understand. It hasn't been easy to give the boy what he needed most and gently prepare him to take on his burden. The boy was a human being, just like everyone else in the village, and he deserved a normal life like everyone else. He was so deep in thought that he was startled to feel a hand rest on his shoulder. The liveliest kunoichi in Konoha said, "Hey old man, how ya doing?" "Ah Anko. Chan, what a surprise," the elderly man grinned and turned to face the girl. "It's been a stressful the last couple of days. How about you, has your seal been acting up?" Anko said, "I've been fine," as she started to synchronize with Karasu while he was still moving through the marketplace. "It's just a pain in the ass like usual." Gazing at the young woman, Karasu couldn't help but smile while Anko sheepishly scratched the back of her head. I can take a look at it now if you want. I know that our appointment isn't until tomorrow, but it looks like you were already planning on just that, weren't you?" Karasu asked. "Ah, still impatient as ever I see. Not even becoming a Chunin helped stamp that out of you." Anko laughed as they walked away from the marketplace and toward the path that would take them to Karasu's temple, saying, "You got me there, old man." They talked about a variety of things as they strolled, from problematic youth, about which Anko laughed, to how her missions had been going since their last encounter. As strange as it may seem, Anko is more drawn to the elderly monk than any other person in Konoha. Since that day 11 years ago, he has never stopped supporting her, lending her a helping hand, an encouraging word, and a shoulder to weep on. The day Orochimaru gave her his cursed seal, the day he betrayed Konoha, and most importantly, her. Like the monks of Fire Temple, the elderly monk has offered his services to Konoha. However, due to his grandson, not many people visit him. It's unfortunate, though, because the elderly monk was far more helpful than the other monks, who hardly possess any monastic knowledge aside from living in a temple. Laughing at whatever thought occurred to them, they soon found themselves looking at Karasu's temple. The elderly monk murmured, "Looks like I have a guest," as he peered at the image of a disheveled man sipping from what Anko could only surmise was a jar of sake while seated on the porch with his back to one of the columns near the entrance. She could tell that the man was dressed in a well-worn hakama and kasode from their distance together, the colors of which she could only surmise were due to time and travel. From where they were, it was difficult to make out much more about the vagrant, but as they got closer, it became obvious. "Hello, my name is Karasu, and this is my temple. How can I help you today?" The disheveled wanderer glanced at Karasu and then Anko, who just managed to catch a glimpse of dull, lifeless brown eyes. He was slightly more attractive than Guy, despite the fact that his eyes seemed a little strange. "Hey Gramps, could you please explain to me why pervy monk asked me to come see you?" the man said, standing up and clearly irritated. Though Anko was perplexed as to who this pervy monk person could be, Karasu appeared to be rendered speechless by this greeting as Anko could see him attempting to mumble words. "Is it really you?" "Yes, it's me, Gramps," the man said, starting to move toward the two of them. "It's me, Jadow." Unaware of the inner turmoil within the monk's mind, Anko was taken aback to witness tears welling up in his eyes as he let go of the grocery bag he was holding in one hand and hurried to confront Jadow. The old monk yelled, "Stupid hatchling," as fury quickly took control of him. He swung his staff around and struck the man in the stomach, sending him flying into the temple and through the sliding door. The overly confident old monk's show of strength made the hyperactive Kunoichi smile. It was refreshing to see him acting this way for once instead of being overly emotional over anyone else but Naruto. But Anko couldn't help but think that the man gave Karasu 2 doses of the finger during the tumultuous flight. The man yelled, "Fuck you," from inside the temple. After a while, Karasu brought tea to the 3 of them as they sat down in the temple's kitchen area. "Hatchling, this is Anko. Chan. Anko. Chan, this is Jadow, my grandson." The Kunoichi was curious as she was unaware that Karasu had other grandchildren besides Naruto. When she gave it some thought, she realized that her knowledge of him was limited to his membership in the order and what he had been doing since arriving in Konoha all those years ago. Glared at the older monk, Jadow said, holding an ice pack to his head, "Pleasure to meet you, Anko. Han." Anko said, "Same here," while agitating her tea. "So just like Naruto, you're Karasu's grandson as well. That is interesting. Does the kid know about this?" "Naruto? He's not sure," Karasu replied. "Jadow, it's been many years since we've last met. Much too long. My old heart always did look fondly over the past when it was just me and you on that mountain. Except for the one time when you stabbed me in the back. Hey, you're the one who challenged me, you stupid old man. And I didn't mean for you to literally stab me. You just had to push my buttons. You were making our fights longer. And that's because I found them enjoyable. And I was working to develop you into a powerful warrior. Gramps, congratulations. Who is this young Naruto now?" "Oh, just your cousin, I see. So how far along is he being trained by you?" "He's come pretty far in the fighting arts, and doing well with both barriers and banishments, but his ninja skills are questionable at best." "What are you doing with those ninja skills?" "We are in a ninja village, Jadow, Anko. Chan is one of Konoha's top ninja." Anko, overcome with gratitude, couldn't resist asking the man, "How did you not realize you were in Konoha?" Konoha. The words were alien to him, but from what the Kunoichi could tell, he appeared somewhat nostalgic. "Well, I was walking in a mountain and I ended up here," he said. A grin quickly split his face as he looked over at the monk. "So Gramps, tell me, since when did you manage to hook up with such a beautiful woman? I've been waiting for Gramps to show up for about an hour before you guys came. I could have sworn that all you did was decide to spend some time skulking about bathhouses, watching women take baths." The thought made the young Kunoichi's lips twitch, but she could only smile as 2 kunai flew out of her hands and grazed Jadow's face as they flew through the air, his eyes widening in horror as he looked at her. It was so satisfying to watch his stupid face as she twirled another kunai around her finger. She was sure those would have stung, but he didn't even wince. With a sigh, Karasu made the decision to stop this show. "Anko. Chan, I would not attempt to intimidate or cripple Jadow in any way. If I may say so, his timing is pretty lucky." "Old man, why is that? Even though he is my stupid grandson, he is the one who taught me everything that I know about seals." Naruto felt the long walk home to be even longer. He looked around him and his companions fearfully, as if something was going to take them all, and he couldn't help but clutch himself. Just a few days had passed since they completed the mission's practical portion, subdued the ninja who had vanished, and preserved the Wave Country. Though he should have been proud of himself for completing his first C-rank mission, all he could feel was fear, anxiety, and hopelessness. He could still clearly recall the power, the overwhelming, intoxicating power that surged out of his very being and terrified his opponent, treating him like a scared newborn. As terrible as that power felt when he needed it most, when he saw Sasuke fall to that fake hunter. Nin, it felt like the most wonderful thing that he had ever felt before in his life. Even though the sight of Sasuke full of needles and lying on the ground, in a death-like state, filled him with rage, just feeling that raw primal power felt much better than being praised for a job well done by his grandfather. As he easily overpowered the hunter. Nin, Haku, he began to realize that he was slowly losing himself to it. It may have surfaced due to his rage, but he could tell that as time went on, the rage had a mind of its own, and it had its own plans. He had never really given it much thought when he was first told that he had a demon sealed inside of him, assuming that whatever seal the Yondaime Hokage had placed on him would keep it contained. However, after experiencing it for the first time and actually relishing the sensation of his fist smashing into Haku's face with a sickening crunch, he realized that the fox was not as far away as he had thought it was. He managed to break free from the power and started to chant prayers of purity in the face of his opponent, who had defeated Sasuke. Even though he hated the boy with all of his heart, he could not afford to allow the fox overwhelm his being much more. Haku looked at him like a fool before he fled and threw himself between both his sensei, Kakashi, and the missing nin, Zabuza. He had to make sure that the fox was under control even though it was dangerous because he had a demon inside of him. To Naruto, dying was preferable than letting such a monster loose upon the world once more. The last 2 days have passed in a blur. He has no idea how the battle on the bridge ended, only that Haku died and Zabuza tore off his boss's head before he died from his wounds. He spent the most of the day in meditation, trying to control the fox and calm his fears, even though he had no idea how to do this. His sensei understood what he was doing, but neither Sakura nor Sasuke could, as neither of them knew of his heavy burden, and Kakashi dared not discuss much of what he was doing in front of them, making Kakashi feel like a cowardly weakling for not training or doing anything to further the mission after the battle on the bridge. He feared both what he was capable of and turning into a monster in his own right. Shortly afterward, the team entered Konoha through the gates. Aware of what the town might do to him, he grew even more afraid, not only of what was inside of him, but also of what the villagers might do. They had never publicly tried anything before, but he was certain that they had at some point. And given how he was feeling right now, he couldn't help but feel uneasy, especially in light of what had happened. Just over the village's threshold, Naruto hesitated and lowered his hat over his eyes in an attempt to appear as unnoticeable as possible. Not that it would help much with his signature items, his staff and shakuhachi, which he and his grandfather are both known for carrying around in public. When his sensei noticed this, he approached him and put a hand on his shoulder, saying, "Naruto, why don't you go home? We can handle the mission debriefing. Take the remainder of the day off and spend time with Karasu. Sama. I'm sure you must have returned by now, as the past few days have been particularly difficult for you." After glancing sideways at his fellow genin, Naruto couldn't help but ask, looking up at the older man, "Are you sure, Kakashi?" "Sensei?" The way that Naruto was being treated by their sensei appeared to irritate both of his teammates. Seeing that his sensei approved, Naruto set out to go home. He walked as fast as he could, being cautious to avoid people in his hurry to see his grandfather and finally have the much-needed conversation that had been put on hold for almost 13 years. "It's fine, Naruto, we can handle this and I'll be sure to fill you in once we're done." Sakura was upset with the man for allowing the foolish monk to depart, saying, "Sensei, why did you send Naruto off and not us? He didn't do nearly as much as the rest of us, and Sasuke-kun was almost killed during the battle." It's true that she neglected to mention that Naruto helped her and Sasuke with the tree climbing exercise that Kakashi made them perform, as well as saving her from the 2 demon brothers and then saving Kakashi from Zabuza's jutsu. Not waiting for an answer, Sakura ran after her crush to catch up to him and ask him out again for the 200th time this year. "Whatever, it just shows that he's a cowardly weakling," Sasuke muttered before moving on towards the Hokage tower. Sakura completely forgot about how Naruto was the most physically strongest member of the team, especially after his performances regarding taijutsu. With a sigh, Kakashi realized that Sasuke shouldn't be sent home just because he was put into a death-like state. After the debriefing, he made sure to drop the Uchiha off at the hospital to make sure that everything was okay with him. After all, it wasn't nearly as bad as what happened to Naruto on the bridge, when he faced the demon that had been sealed away inside him for years and had to deal with its rage. The young man wasn't in the right frame of mind, and seeing his grandfather, one of the most respected men in Konoha, next to the Sandaime Hokage, should be more helpful than having to sit through the debriefing. The awakening of the Sharingan in Sasuke probably blinded him to that now and felt even more superior than he did before, Kakashi surmised, staring at the young Uchiha. He saw that his 2 students were pulling away from him, and he made the decision to go too, remembering to make a note to visit Naruto later because it was getting late and the sun would definitely set soon. As Jadow started to knead some dough, he said, "So you have a cursed seal of sorts on you," which impressed Anko as she cleaned the food. Then, after it spilled onto the ground when the old man dropped it to smash his staff into the younger man, he demanded that the majority of the products be cleaned. Although Karasu is the official host, Jadow didn't seem to trust his grandfather's cooking skills, which much annoyed the old man, but he only agreed that Jadow's claim to be a better cook was true. Seeing as this is a sort of reunion for the two men, Jadow offered to cook dinner for them that evening so they could catch up and learn more about what is going on, especially with her own condition. Anko understood, but she had her doubts about the situation. Suddenly, the old man dumped her onto another person. A complete stranger no less who had only arrived in town about an hour earlier. It was like one doctor leaving with a new doctor. Karasu politely excused himself after explaining that the younger man was much more knowledgeable in the field of seals and could potentially help her more than he could ever had done despite being there for her for so long. Anko washed a potato and said, "Yes, I do have a cursed seal. My sensei gave it to me many years ago." "Man who is a bastard. Hachimaru." "Yes, he is a true bastard," she said, glancing at the man as he started to shape the dough into a flat circle without even meeting her gaze with his dead eyes. Of the 10 children he put his seal of heaven on, only one made it out alive, me. He started massaging his temple over the flattened dough, and she got a response from him right away. "Sounds like you were part of an experiment. Does this seal improve your skills in any way?" She nodded. "Well, this would probably explain why Gramps hasn't been able to get rid of it," she said. "Anyway, after I look over some of Gramps' notes and examine your seal, we can talk more about this later. Anyhow, where is it located?" She turned around and pulled down her coat and shirt just enough to show him the seal, which was at the base of her neck where it met her left shoulder, saying, "Doesn't look like much, but it's a bitch," rather than telling him. "After all these years, the bastard gave me a hickey that hasn't gone away." To Anko's surprise, he looked at it casually but curiously, not looking directly at the seal as most men would have, trying to get a better look at her breasts after she exposed more skin. "So, Anko-han, how is it being a kunoichi? Being one of the best ninjas in Konoha, I'm sure you've had your share of adventures." Anko smiled back and said, "Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Making my opponents spill blood is a lot of fun for me. Even when I get to teasing men in order to gain the upper hand and forcefully strike their faces with a well-hidden kunai." Upon meeting her lifeless, light brown eyes, he grinned and said, "Just what I'd expect from a kunoichi. A life of adventure and lots of blood spilled. So, how do you proceed? Are you a traveling monk affiliated with the order?" She was taken aback by his laugh. "I suppose you could say that, but I'm more of a nomadic jack of all trades who travels a lot and performs sporadic odd jobs for my boss. Since I've been around for as long as I have and have seen as much as I have, you would probably pick up a few things too, given my extensive knowledge of seals." Anko felt that the man who appeared to be only a few years older than Ibiki was making himself appear much older than that, and he raised an eyebrow and blinked a few times. So what was it like with the old man? After giving it some thought, the man said, "Well, this is the first time that Naruto would have left the village without him. Even if he was part of a team led by Hitaki Kakashi himself, the missions that the ninja of this village undertake are dangerous. There is always a chance that he might not return." Karasu sat on the front step, a jar of sake in his hand, and looked out towards the path that led away from the temple. Ever since he returned from his trip and had no one to take care of, he would sit here, watching the path, waiting for his youngest grandson to return home. When the old monk returned home, he looked at the strange creature wandering the temple and said, "It is so much different from before," taking a swig of sake to help him relax and calm down. To think that the boy would pick up a slime of all things as a pet and name it as is without any prior knowledge of them. Though he was aware of the slime from his old friend, he was taken aback to hear that his youngest grandchild had given it the name Slime. It was peculiar, but funny, as Naruto had never heard of this creature before, he was certain of that. Slime was an amiable little creature who kept him company. Recalling his grandson's choice to care for the creature made Karasu sigh, knowing that he would have to discuss it with Naruto once they had settled everything else. Gazing towards the village path, Karasu grinned upon seeing the sight of blonde hair. He got up and started walking towards Naruto, but it was then that he noticed his grandson's appearance. The old monk was more terrified by the young man's terrified expression and frightened eyes than anything else he had ever seen. Hurrying to the boy, who at last notices him, Karasu throws his arms around him and hugs him. The boy flinched in his arms. "Tell me what happened." Fearing this moment, Naruto stood there for a few moments, unsure of what to say or where to start. Finally, after a tense silence, he said, "The fox." All Karasu had to hear for an understanding of what had transpired was that, After leading Naruto to the steps where he was sitting, he sat him down and, while side by side, took a swig of sake and offered it to him. The boy declined, staring at the floor beneath his feet. "You're afraid of the fox, aren't you? Afraid of what his influence could do to you?" His grandson nodded. The boy nodded once more. "Tell me, how did it feel?" Naruto described to him the events of that fateful bridge, including how he witnessed his teammate Sasuke's death and the ensuing fury he felt for the enemy, how the power surged through his body and how amazing it felt to feel that power flowing through his veins, and how he felt when he easily defeated his opponent. "You kept this from me all my life. You didn't prepare me for this," Naruto remarked as he concluded his story. "Though I can appreciate how difficult it must have been, I think you could have done more to help me get ready for this. The bastard fox tried to control me," he exclaimed, balling his fists and refusing to look into his grandfather's eyes. "Naruto, there is only so much that I could have done to prepare you for," said Karasu, letting go of the sai he was holding while taking another drag. When Naruto finally turned to face the elderly monk, his grandson yelled, "Bullshit. You follow the Dark One, the master of all darkness. You could have helped me with this. You could have helped me keep the fox under control," Naruto said, his face burning. Gazing at his grandfather with wide eyes, he was taken aback. Never before had his grandfather hit him in such a way, even though he was and still is a boisterous child due to his excessive energy and Anko's influence from when she used to come over and babysit him. As he slowly began to emerge from his daze, he finally noticed the sorrowful eyes of his grandfather. "I know better than anyone else what I am, and not capable of," Karasu said coolly, returning his hand to his side. "Never speak out about me and what I could do. I have been getting you ready for this. Regarding Jinchurikis, count yourself fortunate. You possess one of the most sophisticated seals ever utilized for containing a Biju. Others have to live in constant fear of their Biju rising up and taking control of their bodies. The spirit of the end himself assisted in the conception of your seal. Give thanks for everything you have." When Karasu saw that Naruto was at a loss for words, he continued, but in a more gentle tone, "Do you recall what I said before I left for the meeting? Before one can control power, one needs to control himself." Smiling now, he put his hand on Naruto's head and tousled his hair. "Exactly, you need more control over yourself if you wish to be able to control the demon within. Besides, you are still young, only 12 years old. To have perfect control over yourself takes many more years of practice and self-discipline." Karasu sniffed, peered through the ruined entrance, and said, "Come Naruto, seems like dinner is ready." He then got up and motioned for his grandson to follow. As soon as he stepped through the temple's threshold and saw the damaged sliding door, Naruto obeyed, shrugging his pack onto one shoulder. "What happened here?" His grandfather simply remarked, "Unexpected guest," as he continued walking towards the kitchen without missing a beat. When Naruto finally smelled the food, he thought it strange that it was cooking on its own while his grandfather was waiting for him outside. Hurrying to his room to drop off his pack and gear, Naruto paused again, still upset about what had happened earlier. He knew the old monk was right. He is still young and cannot be expected to have complete mastery over his body, but it gnawed at him that he needed to do this if he wanted to be a member of the order, especially now that he knew about his secret burden. Naruto realized that he needed to control his own emotions more than ever before, not to bottle them up and turn emotionless, but to ensure that they don't overwhelm him like they did back on the bridge. His grandfather yelled from the kitchen, "Naruto, get your butt over here, we have guests." Head lifting in anticipation to see who it is, all thoughts of dinner cooking itself and the demon inside him vanished as he hurried to the kitchen. Opening the door, Naruto saw the familiar faces of his grandfather and Anko, pausing when he saw the unfamiliar face of a man serving dinner. "Hello," Naruto said, hurriedly sitting down across from Anko at the small square table. Karasu started, gesturing to the kunoichi, "I'd like to introduce you to your cousin, Jadow. I know that you know Anko-chan. How long has it been since I last laid eyes on this, tired eyes?" "Gramps, it's been too long. Hey kid," Jadow said as he was putting the finishing touches to the meal. From what Naruto could tell, it looked almost like a pie with an odd red sauce and melted cheese over it. The man's eyes seemed odd to Naruto, but also add to the fact that they bore no resemblance to one another, and he looked even older than Kakashi. "Sensei." Once again surprise and shock was written right across the young monk's face. Noticing this, the man chuckled. "I'm your cousin all right, just as Karasu is your grandfather, he is mine as well." Anko grinned, Glancing over at the young genin, heard you had yourself a C-rank mission, how did it go? Hey Runt, how's it going? At the beginning, he described how amazing he was in great detail, but when he got to the part about the incident on the bridge, it started to falter. Anko smiled and said, well done, Runt. By the way, nice work. This is Jadow again. What looks like a pie? Not many genin normally get a C rank, let alone a B rank. She glanced over at the elderly monk and saw him nod. Jadow was just happily humming some tune, oblivious to the conversation going on. Yes, it's a pie, the man said, taking a seat across from Karasu. It's a kind of pie that I discovered during my travels. Pizza. I hope everyone enjoys it as it has been a long time since I cooked it. Naruto said, hey, this is pretty good, but it wasn't as good as ramen as he took a few bites of his slice. Jadow nodded despite feeling like he was being made fun of for his abilities. Anyway, how was the mission? It's impressive, Jadow said, finishing his own slice. It brought back memories of the jobs I had when I was younger. In any case, Naruto, how has Gramps been treating you? Naruto shot his grandfather a funny look as he happily ate his own slices. It's great, I just wish that we covered more training before I became a ninja, Naruto said, glancing at his grandfather who had been training him very hard to become a monk and had been very helpful in my quest to become a ninja. Karasu took a swig of sake and said, I'm just giving him the exact same training that I gave you with some added stuff. Started him off with the same basic stuff that I did with you when you were a hatchling. Although he has a great deal of control, his power is still too great for him to fully utilize. How much progress has been made? Jadow questioned while taking a sip of his own. Has my style down, but can't make use of the finer workings of it. That is disgusting. What about the weights? About half of what I gave you when you were his age. Which weights? I don't even remember ever lifting weights before, asked Naruto, giving Karasu a perplexed look. The only things that I ever lifted during training were my staff and my shakuhachi. He doesn't know, Jadow said, grinning a little. Well, this sounds too good to be true. Are you getting soft Gramps, but only half? Karasu smiled mischievously behind his eyes. I know, but do you remember what it was like when you were his age? Jadow sighed with nostalgia, smiling at some far-off memory. Naruto, for now don't worry about it, it's not something you should really concern yourself with. It's all included in your instruction. You'll learn this in due course. The group continued through the night, telling tales of past deeds and adventures, recalling memories of the past and learning more about each other. Past midnight, the Jonin left and Naruto went off to his room for the night, leaving both Karasu and Jadow alone on the front steps drinking some sake. Eventually, Kakashi showed up and joined the small party, giving Naruto a quick debriefing before being officially off duty. Following a pleasant quiet moment, Jadow said, so, how long has the child been a Jinchuriki? It's not like I haven't dealt with Jinchurikis before, Gramps, the elderly monk said, appearing shocked. The Kyuubi no Kitsune was sealed inside of him the day he was born, the elderly man said, letting out a gentle sigh. He only found out about it in the month that I was away for the annual meeting with the order, the man added, observing a nod from his eldest grandson. Knew nothing about it for that long, it's hard to say that I blame you, but I'm guessing that you gave his monk training more importance than ninja training because of his condition, Karasu nodded. The elderly man sighed again, yes, since the Shikifujin seal was installed, there has never been an issue. Based on my observations throughout the years, the seal was gradually drawing the Kyuubi's chakra and transforming it into his own chakra. But recently, on his most recent mission, it surged through him, giving him uncontrollable power and anger. It's a good thing, though, that he is not involved with the fox. If that were the case, it would turn into a crutch for him. Although the Jinchuriki I've seen are strong, they aren't as strong as they could be if they didn't rely on the internal beasts. He has a good head on his shoulders, Gramps, Jadow remarked with a smirk. Human have the potential to become gods themselves. And with that, the two men chose to remain silent for the time being, staring at the stars above. You performed just as well for me as you did for him. Well, it's been ages since I raised you when you were a mere hatchling. He appears to be a decent young man with a level head. He probably doesn't want to interact with the fox in any way. Gazing at Jadow, Karasu grinned and said, he doesn't. Like I said before with Anko. Chan, your timing is quite fortuitous. All right, so tell me, but why did the boss want me here? My responsibilities encompass all areas under his purview, not just one specific location. All the elderly monk could say with a shrug was, "Time will tell, Jadow, time will tell." For Team Kakashi, it's just another ordinary day as they wait for their Jonin instructor, who is consistently running late. The three genin would normally be keeping to themselves during this time, but things were a little more tense than normal this time. The young monk was under a lot of stress during the mission, and both of his teammates, especially the young Uchiha, saw that slip up as a sign of weakness. Naruto's moment of weakness during a battle that could have meant the difference between life and death is unconscionable. Sadly, he was unaware of the internal struggle that was going on inside the monk at the time. But before he left for his team meeting that morning, Naruto took out a scroll that his estranged cousin had given him to pass the time and make the wait more bearable. Jadow wanted to give the young monk a family heirloom, which made the scroll intriguing. With a knowing smile on his face, his cousin had said, "I'd like to see if you have what it takes to handle what's inside this scroll, Naruto," as if he already knew something. It is difficult, though, because in contrast to his voice and face, his cousin's eyes seemed emotionless and lifeless. "This is a keepsake that I made to pass down to my family. Anyway, I can't pass it on to my own kid. How about you try your luck with these moves?" When the elder cousin spoke those words, the young monk present noticed how his older cousin looked, and it filled him with honor to know that even though the scroll was intended for his own family, he was willing to give it to him. Naruto realized then that something had happened to his cousin's family. Suddenly, the scroll felt much heavier than it should have. He felt as though he was holding the souls of his child and his cousin's wife. He brought it closer to him, gave the man a quick glance, and then bowed. Naruto bowed as low as he could to the older man, who laughed and ruffled his hair. "Thank you, Oni-san. I don't know how I could properly thank you for this," Naruto said. His cousin said, "Don't worry about it," before bringing up Naruto once more. He then left Naruto standing by the entrance, staring down at the scroll, and said, "Just tell me if you've noticed anything in particular about the moves in the scroll tomorrow." Naruto examined the scroll again and noted how old the paper appeared to be. It appeared much older than it could have been, which defied logic unless his cousin had simply happened to have a well-aged blank scroll on hand in the first place. Putting that aside, he opened it and saw that it was a scroll containing a specific style of taijutsu. He was unsure of the scroll's name because it wasn't listed, but he did notice that some of the katas were ones he was already familiar with. It seems like they were greatly impacted by Gramps, the monk concluded after examining them. He was positive that his grandfather had shown him the first one. However, he was unsure about how he actually knew a few of the others. He simply knew them, even though he was aware that he had never worked with them previously. He muttered, "Very strange," and put the scroll down on the ground beside him before standing up and taking the first stance. He was very familiar with this stance and felt most at ease in it. His grandfather had taught him how to adopt it, and he always felt a rush of strength when he adopted it. Maybe Oni-san taught him some of the moves and he let that one slip when teaching me what he knew was the most significant lesson he had learned from his grandfather more than anything else. His conceited teammate finally spoke after a short while, asking, "What are you doing, Dobi? Trying to make yourself look better even though you're a coward?" After they had easily completed the first set. At last, his other teammate spoke up, saying, "Yeah, what are you doing, Naruto?" He just looked at them while keeping his form and let out a heavy sigh. "Just working on some moves in a scroll that my cousin gave me. He wanted to see if I had the right stuff to learn these moves," he said. Sakura questioned, "It's taijutsu, right?" Not understanding how to determine whether someone possessed the necessary skills to learn it. He nodded to his partner, starting to lose himself in the moves. They felt so natural to him that, even though he was still unfamiliar with them, he knew he was starting to transition into the more advanced form. It seemed as though someone was whispering instructions into his ears. That thought caused him to freeze, and fear spread across his face. Naruto leapt to the scroll, startling his teammates even more as he examined it and attempted to take in every word that was written on the paper. He could not have possibly slipped into and completed the forms, which he had never seen or reviewed before. Finding that there was a problem with the scroll, Naruto created a single-hand seal using the method his grandfather had taught him to channel his chakra for his monastic techniques. Pouring his chakra over the scroll, he attempted to examine every aspect of it, searching for any evidence of a dark taint, desperately hoping that the fox was not misbehaving and that the scroll might have belonged to his cousin's family. He examined it and concluded, horrifyingly, that it was not possessed and that something was leading him, probably the fox. He rolled up the scroll, determined to discuss this development with his grandfather, fearing that something of the sort would occur. After putting the scroll away inside his clothing, he calmed down. Sitting down to meditate, he realized that only the Lord knew how much he needed to find inner peace. After arriving at the training ground about an hour later, Kakashi pretended to have an explanation but broke down when he saw the young monk. He disregarded Sakura's criticism of him for being late. "Naruto, is everything okay?" He knelt beside the boy as he approached Naruto to find out what was going on. Naruto opened his eyes and said, "Kakashi. Sensei, I don't know," to his worried sensei. He then gave Kakashi an explanation, saying, "I was just going over a taijutsu scroll that Jadow Oni-san gave me and all of a sudden, something weird happened. Mind if I take a look at it, Naruto? I'm not sure if I should, sensei. Oni-san gave it to me, and then this happened. I'm not sure if I should just simply pass it around. After we're done for the day, I'm going to hand it off to Gramps so he can take a look at it and have him explain to me what is going on." Kakashi then got up and pulled the monk to his feet, saying, "All right then. Okay kiddies, we're going to the Hokage Tower to get ourselves a mission for the day." With Sakura following him, Sasuke exclaimed, "Finally, another challenge worthy of me," and he started to head towards the village. "Aren't you coming, Naruto?" Kakashi asked, pausing when he saw that Naruto wasn't following. The young monk paused to consider his options before nodding and jogging to catch up with his group. Kakashi was falling behind his team and thinking about the individual abilities of his students. The final Uchiha inside the walls of Konoha and the top rookie of the current year is Uchiha Sasuke. Extremely gifted and regarded as a genius by many in the village, he would have to concur with that assessment based on his performance in the field and on his test results. However, his social skills were practically non-existent, as he felt everyone else was inferior to him. With a ninjutsu range that leaves most genin, even some of the older ones, wanting, the boy, who comes from the Uchiha bloodline, quite the test and gave the Jonin a run for his money. Although genjutsu wasn't one of his strongest suits, he was still able to identify and neutralize them, if not more so now that his bloodline had awakened during that final battle against Zabuza and his apprentice. The boy has good taijutsu as well. He is undoubtedly one of the village's many Chunins, and with the Sharingan, he will only get better. He could still work on improving his attitude and chakra control, though. The best kunoichi in this year's class is Haruno Sakura. Quite adept at the academy's foundational skills and very useful with them, but given her chakra control, he can only speculate as to what she might develop into if she focused on learning a branch of skills that would allow her to use her control. She could be very scary in the future with that brain of hers, but not right now because of her obsession with Sasuke. It's definitely something he needs to work on, because it's holding her back. The team's literal multi-class ninja, Uzumaki Naruto, comes next. The moniker, multi-class ninja, just seemed to fit with his two skill sets. He has no idea why exactly. Kakashi, who had left the academy in the middle of his lesson, was not taken aback by this development. It's not shocking that Naruto ended up there given his skill sets. Normally, the cadet with the lowest grade would be selected for the team, but he would have ended up with someone else if he hadn't asked Naruto to join him. That person would have most likely severely damaged the team, forcing him to wait until the next class to graduate. He owed it to the Yondaime to instruct Naruto. Without that man, he would not have developed into the person he became. Seeing that he was drifting from discussing his students' abilities and going off subject, he immediately reminded himself that, although the boy is from the middle of the pack, his two greatest abilities, based on what he had observed, are his taijutsu and his chakra control. Had it not been for his mediocre academic performance and absence of ninjutsu, he would have received the best marks in the class. The young monk actually caused him some difficulty during his test, particularly when he added several cage bunshins to the mix. Without a doubt, the child was the strongest in taijutsu and could easily outclass Sasuke if he so desired. However, during their practice sparring, the child refrained enough from hitting Sasuke that Sasuke was able to identify his own mistakes. The boy's chakra control is also astonishing, comparable to that of the majority of the villagers' Jonin. Paradoxically, he possessed no genjutsu abilities whatsoever, yet he was able to dismiss them with ease. Karasu Sama had to have taken action, Kakashi reasoned, trying to figure out how Naruto could be immune to genjutsu and not even notice it. Given the boy's immense chakra and control, Kakashi thought the boy would gain a lot from using one of his sensei's personal jutsu to supplement his own lack of ninjutsu. If the last few weeks had taught him anything, it was that he had a lot of work ahead of him. Particularly now that the exams are approaching. Perhaps he is pushing them a little too quickly, but he knew it would help them learn. Even though the exam is essentially a controlled battle in which examinees may lose their lives, he believed that his team could prevail. He reached into his pouch and took out his orange book of choice. He laughed and said, "Let the kids say what they want. They simply aren't aware of the depth of the story." An hour later, Team Kakashi was seen completing a D-rank mission throughout the village, which infuriated Sasuke, who thought he was too young for such a task. The boy felt that, especially after completing their previous mission, it was an insult to his abilities. If it weren't for his weakness, he would have blamed Naruto for this unfortunate event. It was not far from the truth, though. Kakashi believed that Naruto would be relieved to return to these menial tasks. Though he did not express his gratitude outwardly, Naruto was obviously very appreciative. Kakashi truly believed that he should give his team some time to relax after the tense events of the previous mission. Additionally, it would be disrespectful to have one of them hospitalized after leaving on a mission at this time, especially with the exams quickly approaching. Perhaps Kakashi gave them this mission to help them relax a little after their previous mission. He was trying to find a way to strengthen their bond as a team. In any case, teaching genin teams how to collaborate before placing them in a dangerous situation is the true goal of these missions. Let the majority of people express their opinions regarding these missions, Kakashi considered as he turned the page of his book. It is much preferable to genuinely establish a team dynamic prior to engaging in combat. Why she was sitting at the dango shop was beyond Anko's comprehension. She was aware, of course, but she became irritated when she considered the cause. Suddenly, the old man throws his grandson at her and offers to help her with the dreadful seal of heaven. Yes, he had told her stories about his childhood growing up with the old man, but that hardly amounted to much trust in the first place. Once her sensei left the village, she found herself abandoned by everyone else, and the number of people she could genuinely trust in the village was only one. She bit off another dango from the skewer she was holding in an attempt to calm her racing thoughts. The time they had decided to meet here was almost noon. She didn't know why he was so insistent about having lunch and talking about it here, of all places. She saw the matter as extremely personal and private, which is what could easily turn more people against her. She nearly missed it as a man sitting across from her, wearing an umbrella hat and a dark cloak, entered her thoughts. Jadow put down his book and hung his hat from the side of his neck, saying, "How ya doing, Anko? Han?" Anko noticed as she looked at him that he was dressed very differently from the previous evening, even down to his cloak. He was dressed in what appeared to be a well-worn high-collar cloak, a dark blue shirt underneath, and baggy brown shorts, from what she could see when he sat down. The kunoichi muttered, "Could be better," as she cast a sidelong glance at the book beside him. She thought it strange because the book was a fairly large paperback that was bound differently from what she was used to, and she couldn't make out the characters on the cover. "What do you have there? Some kind of holy tome that only high-ranking priests can read?" He chuckled, looking down at his book, then motioned to a waitress. He told the waitress, "It's called the Necronomicon, written by a man from a faraway land," before placing his order. He clarified after noticing the kunoichi's raised eyebrow. "It is a most ancient manuscript, written by the Black Sorcerer, Abdul Alhazred. Written in virgin blood and bound in human flesh. This book holds the secrets to all of his black magic." Anko asked, "So that is not paper and is human flesh? Actually, why would you be walking around with such a blasphemous work in broad daylight when your own grandfather is a highly respected monk?" With a detached expression that conveyed her disbelief. Jadow accepted his food and thanked the waitress, saying, "Because this book is really just a collection of short stories written by a man named Howard Phillips Lovecraft." He took a sip and went on. He was a man that led the way to an interesting literary philosophy called cosmicism. It is a belief that humans are of very little significance in the grand view of the universe and that there is no such thing as a god. The kunoichi said, sipping her tea, "Well, the Biju exist and they're terribly powerful. Even then, god and goddesses exist, if the order has anything to say about it." Anko shook her head. "Has Gramps told you much about the order and what it's composed of? Any real detailing the order or his own role within it?" Once more the kunoichi declined. "What you know of as gods and goddesses aren't really that, just really powerful spirits and demons. There are only two beings that can really be considered gods, and they are the great lords. The lords created everything in existence, including the gods and goddesses. How would you know this? That's a secret, exclaimed the man, putting down one skewer to pick up another. Reaching into his cloak, he pulled out a scroll that Anko recognized. Anyway, the book is a good read, just a little something that some publishers put together many years after Lovecraft's death. Strange thing about art is that when the artist dies, they become much more popular. Well, let's get down to a bit of business, shall we? We won't really go into your seal yet, because I can tell that you're quite annoyed, frustrated, and would like to do nothing more than to kick my ass. Glaring at him, geez, what told you that? Was her question. Why ask for the meeting then if you knew this? Well, it wouldn't really hurt if we got to know one another before I really do any work, Jadow said, waving the scroll somewhat in front of her. He then leveled the scroll at Anko, who was leaning his elbow against the table. There should be a certain level of trust first before we begin. You already have that trust with Gramps, though it might be strained now with what he did. But he did it with the best of intentions. And trust me, I wouldn't be doing this if Gramps hadn't have asked me. Nor would I have been in the area if my boss didn't send me here. She reached for the scroll, saying, I guess the feeling is mutual then, but he withdrew it from her. You don't care that much for me, nor do I care much for you. After placing the scroll on the table in front of the kunoichi, Jadow said, yes, well, that may or may not change once we get to know each other. It really doesn't matter in the end though, because I will be removing that seal from you whether you like it or not. As getting along and having some trust would just make things go much smoother. Anko took the scroll at that moment, narrowing her eyes as a kunai slid into her free hand. She then waved it absent-mindedly at the man, watching as he wriggled a little. Even though you're the old man's grandson, I'll gut you if you try anything. You got that? Jadow gave a nod. Now then, we learned a bit about each other last night, but why don't we? The man interrupted, his dead eyes in a smirk that seemed to annoy Anko even more. Have a spar, he said. The kunoichi smiled at the idea of kicking his ass, even though she was annoyed, so she agreed. Good, we can duke it out later. For now, let's just relax and enjoy each other's company so we can better beat the living shit out of each other later. Anko felt the impulse to pull out a kunai and ram it through the man's lifeless eyes as her eye twitched at that moment. Really, if there's one thing about the man that she finds annoying, it's his damn eyes. Your eyes piss me off, she decided in the spirit of things. You wound me, fair maiden of sharp stabby objects, Jadow shot back, furrowed brow higher. Observing her own raised eyebrow, he continued, it's because they lack life in them, right? Well, that's because making eyes appear to have life in them through the use of illusions is impossible. My eyes aren't the most pleasant things to see directly. I lost both of them on the field of battle many years ago, and a field medic performed a transplant in the field with the closest thing available. And that would be an octopus, so you can understand why I have to hide them under an illusion. Bullshit. Show me. Are you sure? He inquired, surveying the individuals surrounding them as he looked around the stand. When he realized she wouldn't be persuaded, he waved his hand over his eyes and two dark, bulbous eyes materialized. It isn't a pleasant sight to behold. Anko ran to the back of the stand to throw up because the sight of the two eyes was too upsetting and repulsive for her to handle. She didn't realize that the eyes had lost their life. He gave another wave of his hand over his eyes, laughing merrily. For Team Kakashi, it was an exhausting and protracted day. Their mission was mind numbing and comparatively easy, which was ideal for Naruto. The chore didn't bother him. He usually did that and more at the temple back home. Returning to the training ground, they were preparing to resume their customary afternoon routine. He was bothered by Sasuke's arrogant expression as he stood opposite him in the clearing. Kakashi instructed them both to spar, and that they could only do so by using their taijutsu. Naruto was aware that this, not Sasuke's, was his greatest ability. If he really tried, he could easily lay him down on the ground, just as Sasuke did, or at least, he hopes, because Sasuke knew this from prior experiences in the academy and after being assigned to the same team. The young monk thought, seriously, what is Sensei thinking? As he thoughtlessly took a stance and strangely noted that it was the one from that morning. Although it may sound arrogant, wouldn't it be preferable if I were paired with Sakura so that I could help her advance further than this bastard? Observing that Naruto had assumed a posture, Sasuke followed suit, maintaining the same arrogant expression on his face. Even though Kakashi prohibited it, the monk could almost hear Sakura applaud for the Uchiha. And for good reason. since such behavior could potentially destroy the already precarious team dynamic. He was getting ready for the go ahead when he thought to himself, just because he was the top student in the class and Uchiha, she fawns over him. From their time in the academy, the girls have always harbored romantic and love-oriented fantasies towards the punk. And this was before any of them had even reached puberty, so Naruto had no idea why. The monk's healthy respect for the other sex is undoubtedly a result of his grandfather, pervy monk, pervy sage, and Anko, Onisan's combined corruption. Despite all of their eccentricities, he noted that they had all stated that understanding of feelings came later in life, as strange as it sounds for that to have happened to him. Since Sakura and the other girls back at the academy were so young, they probably didn't really understand what they were feeling, so what they felt was probably just a passing crush that would go away eventually. The signal was there, a rock bouncing off a tree. This is Kakashi's preferred way of getting the spars going. It keeps them conscious of their surroundings while they train. He knew what to expect from the Uchiha's lunge because of his grandfather's training. He parried the blow with a palm strike that was powerful enough to stun the other boy after deflecting the fist to the side. He then retreated a few steps and assumed his original position. Naruto saw that Sasuke was much more enraged than usual when they sparred, as he peered into his opponent's eyes. Sasuke threw caution to the wind and threw himself back into the battle, launching a barrage of blows at the monk, only to have every blow parried, sidestepped, or avoided. Never once did Naruto attack or counter with more force than necessary to make the Uchiha realize he needs to improve his form. He made the decision to move after growing weary of his opponent's repetitive actions. Naruto dodged the most recent blow, a punch intended for his head, and swung one leg beneath the attacker to catch him across the chest with an arm. The outcome was immediate. Naruto was standing over Sasuke, who was sprawled out on his back. With a frown, he extended his hand to assist his opponent in standing up, but the other boys swatted it away and yelled at him. When they resumed their spar, Sasuke would always fail to overcome the monk's defenses, regardless of his strategies. While Sakura sparred with the two boys, Kakashi stood with her off to the side of the clearing, idly observing that she was bouncing a little bit even though she had been told not to cheer. He also noticed that she was growing increasingly irritated at the fact that Sasuke was being treated like a man, even though she was against monks. Strangely enough, this was the main reason he wanted the two boys to spar. He was more than capable of handling Sasuke, if not more so, but the boy would only dismiss it as his being a jonin and not by someone who is the same age and monastic training as him. These spars are supposed to help both boys, but their main goal was to bring the haughty Uchiha down to earth. If nothing was done, the boys' arrogance and attitude might very well bite them all in the ass one day. Without taking his eyes off the fight, Kakashi asked his final pupil, Sakura, what do you see? Judging by the even-handed expression on his face, it seemed as though Sasuke was taking his time using his dujutsu. Sakura tried her best to conceal the unexpected question from her sensei, but it wasn't very successful considering how much of a skill and experience gap there was. Glaring at the monk, she responded, Naruto is beating on Sasuke-kun, then shook her head. But he is showing that Sasuke-kun is leaving himself wide open to his counterattacks and that his form needs to shape up a bit. The pink-haired girl was annoyed by the Jonin's remarks, you have a good eye Sakura, as he ruffled her hair, never taking his gaze off the spar. What else can you see? The girl, smirking at her sensei, said, Sasuke-kun is reading Naruto's moves much easier than before, crossing her arms over her chest. He turned on his Sharingan, correct? The Jonin asked, nodding. Then why is he losing if the Sharingan is such a powerful dujutsu? As good as the dujutsu is for giving added insight into his opponent's actions, it doesn't help if the user's body isn't capable of keeping up with what he sees. The kunoichi remarks, so because Sasuke-kun is slower than Naruto, it's not helping him at all. Naruto may not be aware of this because he is still learning the dujutsu, but the other boys most likely are. Though it did make her wonder why Sasuke continued to use the Sharingan if it wasn't helping him at the time, she would have preferred to save her chakra rather than waste it if she had been fortunate enough to have a dujutsu similar to the Sharingan in the same circumstance. When Kakashi finally looked down at Sakura with a smile hidden under his mask, he complimented her, saying, you may not be the strongest on the team Sakura, but you are definitely the brightest. The kunoichi blushed at her sensei's compliments before being startled into action. Now make your entrance and make that spar into a free-for-all. She couldn't help but smile even though she was a little irritated with the man. She said, "Yes, sensei," and dashed off to join the boys. She yelled, "Graceful entry," as she threw herself at the closest boy, who just so happened to be Naruto. At the sound of the shout, Naruto dove under another of Sasuke's blows and switched positions. Sakura's foot in Sasuke's face brightened Kakashi and Naruto's days. The three genin emerged into the open to take whatever Kakashi desired following the arrival of the new challenger. When Kakashi saw this, he couldn't help but observe that Sakura's form was superior to Sasuke's, despite Sakura's weakness. As he watched the spar, Kakashi thought to himself, "She can be annoying at times, but she is definitely my brightest student. The suggestions I provided her with truly helped her to improve. Definitely more enjoyable to instruct than both boys combined. Once I start teaching Naruto some jutsu, perhaps he could match her." The three genin would engage in a protracted battle during which they would each fire shots at the other. Sasuke, who has tunnel vision, would only concentrate on Naruto and would fail every time he tried to avoid getting hit by Sakura. Sakura is sorry for what he did, but their sensei had instructed them to engage in a free dot-for-dot-all spar. However, the kunoichi would pay more attention to Naruto. Kakashi wasn't sure if this was because she had kicked Sasuke in the face or not. He was happy, though, when Sakura would hit Sasuke, exposing Sasuke's increasing lack of talent despite being the top student in the academy. It was not like how they usually sparred one-on-one, with Naruto switching between the other two genin. Here, it's pushing them all the way to the limit. Knowing this, Kakashi was aware that it would reveal something about the other, possibly even about Naruto if the latter wasn't holding his own all that well. The Jonin could tell that Sasuke was growing impatient with the slow pace of development. It was difficult to determine if it was a good or bad thing, especially given how Sakura continued to sneak shots at him. But he finally had enough of this and, in a fit of rage, he caught the kunoichi and threw her at the monk. Aware of how shaken the girl was after that, Naruto grabbed her and moved her to the side. The Jonin wondered, is she starting to see the other side of the Uchiha? As he watched Sasuke blindside Naruto with a flurry of punches and kicks. Naruto was knocked off balance by the improvised attack and was unable to mount a defense in time. Sasuke only needed that one moment to catch the monk, even though he was able to block and dodge a few. After the high of using his teammate as an improvised attack, he realized he had the upper hand and felt compelled to repay the favor. He took hold of Naruto's clothes and got ready to throw him by falling back and pushing the monk over him. It failed miserably, and he was unable to bring the monk down at all. Naruto refused to move at all, giving the Uchiha the impression that he was attempting to move a mountain. Kakashi watched the Uchiha's pathetic attempt to toss Naruto and thought, he should have known better than to try that, left himself exposed. The clearing echoed with the sound of a fist hitting flesh. The Uchiha was taken aback when Naruto's fist struck the boy's cheek. The boy had it coming, Kakashi thought to himself while he kept his eyes on the screen. Even as he watched Sasuke be thrown like he did Sakura, he laughed. With his head softening his landing, the young Uchiha touched down. Naruto refrained from doing so because Sakura had just recovered and was attacking the monk with her own blows. Though it was a better experience for her than facing Sasuke, all of them were ineffective against the boy. Neither of them saw the other frown or start to make hand motions while they were occupied with their dueling. Suddenly, Kakashi was standing next to Sasuke, holding both of the boy's hands with his single one. His other two students instantly stopped when they saw his hand holding Sasuke back, saying, "That's enough." He then looked up to the sky before vanishing in a cloud of smoke. "That's it for today, go ahead and relax. I'll see you all in the morning." When Sasuke was finally free of the Jonin, he turned away from his team with a frown. Ignoring the kunoichi's attempts to court him, he put his hand in his pockets and started to leave. She was merely an obstruction, as demonstrated in the spar, and he had no use for her. He detested her because she kept getting in his way during the spar. The Uchiha silently left Sakura behind in his team, thinking to himself, women are weak and always get in the way. Sakura was taken aback by the obvious coldness and was hurt by her crush's behavior. Although it wasn't part of their sensei's instructions, she did land some good hits on him that she wouldn't have landed in a regular sparring match other than a free dot-for-dot-all. She was equally shocked and frightened by the angry expression on his face when he threw her at Naruto. Sakura may not think highly of Naruto, particularly after his actions in the previous mission, but she must acknowledge that she is grateful that he caught her and placed her down rather than discarding her. She was so caught up in her contradictory ideas about why Sasuke was treating her the way he was that she was unaware of Naruto's approach until his hand suddenly touched her shoulder and startled her. She cried out, "Don't do that, Naruto," and covered her heart with her hand. Beneath his umbrella hat, the monk grinned and laughed. He grinned and said, "Sakura, you need to pay more attention to your surroundings." The kunoichi gave him a perplexed look and said, "Don't worry about that jerk, Sakura, we wounded his pride today." The girl admitted that he is, saying, "He thinks that he is the greatest just because he was born Uchiha. If he was, then he'd have done much better back there and not needed to use a cheap trick in a spar to land a few blows on me." The girl then cast a downward glance. "He is too prideful, Sakura. Sure, he was the top student of our class and is Uchiha, but that doesn't mean he is the greatest. After today, I'm pretty sure that is why Sensei had me spar with him first before having you jump in." Sighing, he looked at Sakura. "Well, Sakura, I'll catch y'all later." Sakura lingered for a short while longer, taking in the events of the day while she watched her teammate leave. Beginning with the meeting, moving on to the mission, training in the afternoon, and concluding with the spar. Since the beginning of their team, Sakura felt like the third wheel, despite Naruto being a monk. Sasuke never truly seemed to like her, regardless of her efforts, not even after Naruto's moment of weakness at the bridge. She is happy to have joined the team, especially with a sensei like Kakashi who, in spite of his bad habits, has been a great help to her. She said to herself before leaving, "Must be because he can focus on me a bit more than either of the guys at the moment." However, if Kakashi Sensei intended to use that spar to teach Sasuke a lesson, then he's a bit of a cunning bastard. Sarutobi Hiruzen could not help but notice that every single one of his ninja was experiencing anxiety as he looked around the room. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the start of the meeting, but he was unable to do so because Mitarashi Anko and Maeda Guy, two Jonin, were still absent. Before even the perpetually late Hitaki Kakashi, both Jonin were running behind schedule. Though Guy has always made it a point to be on time, and the old man knew that Anko was on her day off, it didn't bother him too much that the two were running late. The Hokage sat behind his desk with Shiranui Genma and Namiyashi Rado by his side, thinking, both should have been here by now. Should things get out of control during the meeting, both men are prepared to help. There have been a few instances in the past where ninjas have become quite raucous in protest. There are a lot of foreign ninjas in the village already, including the... His thoughts were interrupted by the opening of the double doors. Entering the chamber and presenting themselves to the other attendees, there stood the absent Jonin and Karasu's eldest grandson, whom he had only recently encountered that morning. Their unkempt appearance and the fact that Guy was receiving support from both Jadow and Anko somewhat agitated them. Jadow asked, Han, how are you doing?" as the three stepped further into the space and threw Guy into a chair. The man received an immediate glare from the many ninja in the room for his lack of respect for Hiruzen. The man and his ninja's antics made the old Hokage laugh, as he noticed that the irritated ninjas didn't seem to faze him in the slightest. "Sorry about tying up both Anko.Han and Guy.Han. We were having a light friendly spar and lost track of time." Guy couldn't finish his sentence because Anko, who appeared more irritated than normal, had him restrained on the back of his head. Jadow.San was most youthful. "I see that you are becoming comfortable here, Jadow.San, Hiruzen said, settling his elbows on his desk and resting his chin on his folded hands. Anko gave both men an annoyed look, and their appearance suggested that whatever they were doing was anything but light. "See to it that you don't tie up my ninja again when I summon them." He smiled, bringing back memories of that morning when he had first met the man and heard him refer to him as Hiru.Han. "Yes, Hiru.Han, I shall keep that in mind," the man said. He looked over at Guy and said, "We came as soon as Anko.Han saw the hawk, but we had to carry Guy.Han here from the fields." Anko smirked at Guy's sputtering and smothered a snort. This most youthful person here was most unyouthful by not being able to pick himself up and drag his own ass here. She couldn't really blame him, though, because Jadow really pummeled him once he jumped into their friendly spar. The strange Jonin thought Jadow was attacking Anko as he was passing the training area where the two were practicing. Ultimately, he was left flat on his back and had to be carried by his green ass to the Hokage Tower. "Good," Hiruzen said, nodding as he surveyed the room before returning to his friend's grandson. The man nodded and then moved to the back of the room, leaning against a wall. Jadow-san, if you don't mind, can you meet me in my office once this meeting is over? You're more than welcome to stay, of course, but I must ask that you keep to yourself. The group of ninjas stood straight, offering their lord their undivided attention. Now then, I'm sure that all of you have noticed by now. 1 week from today. To make it completely official, I hereby announce we shall be holding the Chunin selection exam, 7 days from now, on the 1st of July. Now then, we'd like to hear first from the senseis of our newest genin. Although it was difficult for Jadow to tell who had moved forward from his vantage point, she was able to recognize the silver head of hair, which could only indicate that it was Naruto's sensei. He couldn't really see the other two. One was a thin man with shoulder-length black hair and a strange bandage like top, and the other had to be a man dressed like most of the ninjas in the room, with short, spiky black hair. Jadow shook his head, perplexed as to why he felt the need for such formalities, given that this was an exam. Team Kakashi, Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke, and Uzumaki Naruto. I vow upon the honor of my clan, the Hitaki, that all 3 of them are ready for the Chunin selection exam, Kakashi said before he kind of lost consciousness over the majority of what the Hokage had to say. The now identified Kunoichi said, Team Kurenai, Aburame Shino, Hyuga Hinata, and Inazuka Kiba, before uttering the same words as Kakashi. Jadow only knew that her name was Kurenai and that her clan was the Yuhi. He was starting to notice a pattern with the team names. The other man in the trio said, Team Asuma, Akamichi Choji, Nara Shikamaru, and Yamanaka Ino, asserting that these genin were also exam ready. However, when Jadow learned that his clan was the same as the Hokage's, an eyebrow did raise on his face. The Hokage said, glancing at the 3 jonin, how unusual. After only a few months out of the academy, you all declared that each of your students are ready after only a few months without any hesitation, Jadow said, zoning out once more as the throng started to murmur and a ninja who had presumably taught each of the genin started to express his own concerns. The man laughed as he recalled his own childhood and the adventures he had when he was roughly Naruto's age. If the instructor, whose name he assumed to be Iruka, is correct, then the other genin must be the same age as Naruto. Following the resolution of the rookie genin dispute, the remaining ninjas were given the opportunity to propose their own teams. To Jadow's surprise, Guy got to his feet and offered his own nomination. He waited patiently for Anko to nominate her own team, but it didn't appear that she would, as she was called forward in the company of 2 other men. Both men had bandanas on, but one had a black trenchcoat on, and the other looked like Kakashi. The Hokage said, Anko, Hayate, Ibiki, glancing at each of the 3 in front of him. He dismissed all of the ninja in attendance after realizing that none of them had any questions. You will be the chief examiners for the 3 parts of the exam. Ibiki, you shall give the first test. Anko, you shall take the second, and you, Hayate, shall have the honor of giving the 3rd exam. Any questions? After the ninja had all left, Hiruzen stood up and headed for the door, Genma and Rado trailing closely behind. He gestured for Jadow to follow as he was ready to leave, and both jonin watched the man with caution as he joined them. They met the man only that morning, so there's no need to let their guard down, even if he was with Karasu. Once more, Karasu waited for his youngest grandson to return home while perched on the front step of the temple. He was confident that Jadow could take care of himself and might show up tonight, depending on how their attempts to make plans with the Hokage that morning went. If everything went according to plan, he should return in the morning, the aged monk mused while sipping sake. Then he just watched the clouds as he raised his head to the sky. How are you getting along with Anko? Chan, I wonder. I hope none of you killed each other or teased the poor girl too much. The elderly abbot was interested in learning more about the enigma surrounding the so-called cursed seal of heaven from his grandson. How long he tried to break through that seal is known only to his lord and his son. Yes, he could have asked for their help, but that would have been extremely disrespectful to both of them. Of course, it was somewhat the same story with his grandson, but who better to assist you with knowledge of a seal than the person who taught you the subtler aspects of the craft? Anko was irritated and furious with him last night, but he can handle it. It was for her own long-term well-being and happiness. Pulling out his own copy of the notes from inside his robes, he read them aloud and muttered, "That seal really is a curse." The poor girl's health was not the only thing that was harmed by the seal that Orochimaru gave her. did far too much to her that he could not bring himself to tell her that it would affect her own happiness if she were to ever settle down. He recalls the hurt and alone girl that Hiruzen brought to him when the bastard left her behind and marked her. He has supported her through the years, offering her a listening ear, a talking partner, and a reason to be proud of herself. She was as much of his grandchild as Jadow or Naruto, even though she wasn't officially one. The old monk simply didn't know how to tell Anko about his burden. It was agonizing to tell Naruto about it as well. Really, all he could do was support her without fail. I'm not sure why, but it seems like I'm getting older, he thought to himself as he peered down at Slime, who was always grinning at him. He thought back to the previous night and what he and Jadow did once they returned inside the house as he reached down and scratched the small monster behind its pointy tip. That shouldn't be, must be the times and me worrying about both kids, he said. They both crept into Naruto's room to see how the boy was doing with the Shikifu Jin that identified him as the Kyuubi no Kitsune's Jinchuriki. Only this Biju, or a part of the once great Jubi, goes by the name Kyuubi no Kitsune. A few other Kitsunes in the world have 9 tails. His eldest grandson's additional perspective validated his own theories regarding the seal and what it is doing to Naruto. He never imagined the boy would be able to call on its power to any significant extent aside from its subtle influence with healing the boy from injuries. The emotional state of mind in his madness, however, was an unexpected event. To be completely honest, he had not given much thought to the fact that the boy he saw had the Biju's chakra siphoned, allowing him to summon strength. The boy was born a human and was only made into a sacrifice by a ritual, even though he is a Jinchuriki. The boy's inherent humanity will never alter, and being a Jinchuriki doesn't make him any different in that regard either. Using the Biju's power would only make him overly dependent on it in the end. Relying on its own power rather than his own, even though the chakra is extremely strong, the boy is still not using it. Despite the apparent weakness and frailty of humans, the elderly monk has been around for a considerable amount of time and is certain that humans are the strongest race. Did some god, goddess, demon, or spirit vanquish the terrifying Jubi? No, it was a human, a person known to all as the Rakudo Sennin in this day and age. The only people who could possibly remember his name, now lost to the pages of history, are those who have known him in person and are still alive. The Biju are the most likely candidates, but getting in touch with them is a different matter entirely. All Karasu knew was that the person was said to be a god, that he was human, and that he had traveled the lands before he had set foot on them. Humans can always overcome overwhelming odds through the power of their willpower, he thought to himself as he saw a familiar head of blonde hair approaching. He wanted to smile, but was distracted by his own thoughts and his grandson's serious expression. If he makes use of its power, he won't ever realize his full potential because he will only grow accustomed to using it. In order to reach one's potential, there is never a shortcut. Years passed before Jadow and I finally made it there, and Anko Chan is still working on it. Gramps, we need to talk, the young man said, presenting his grandfather with a scroll. Jadow. Oni-san gave me this earlier and something weird happened. Karasu couldn't help but notice how old the parchment looked as she studied the scroll. When he started to unfold it, he questioned, how so? Naruto sat down next to his grandfather and explained what had happened, to which Slime hopped up into his lap. It looks like an ordinary scroll to me. Oh, this old thing. What happened? The elderly monk rolled the scroll back up and gave it back to Naruto after the boy had finished his story. This is nothing to worry about. Consider it a blessing, but wait until morning to talk to Jadow about this. When a hawk suddenly landed in front of them and bowed to his grandfather, Naruto exclaimed, Gramps, how can I not worry about it? It's not the first time he's seen birds simply seem to respect their grandfather, but it's still strange. The bird nodded at the old man in return, and he held out his arm for it to perch on. When Karasu noticed a message attached to its leg, he took it and sent the bird on its way. Who is it from? You cousin, he replied as the elderly man stood up. Come on, we're going to town. Why? Inquired the young boy as he stood up, Slime curled up in his garments. Something wasn't right. Naruto was unable to sense Slime's presence at all. Naruto sighed, putting his hat back over his head and joining his grandfather. Knowing he won't get more from the old man, Karasu smirked as he started to walk away, saying, You'll see. The only sounds either of them made were the jingle of the rings on top of their shikuhos and their soft footsteps as they made their way to and through the village. After some time of walking, they came to a stop in front of Ichiraku's, Naruto's favorite restaurant in the village. His mouth started to water at the sight of it, just thinking of all the amazing variations of ramen that existed. His favorite food was miso, and the best miso in the world is made by Ayame. Wanichan and her father Tucci. As they approached the restaurant, the boy thought excitedly, Gramps was planning on surprising me for dinner. Karasu said, "Good evening, Ayame. Chan, Tucci.san, greeting the proprietors behind the stand in return. When one hears those words and sees the four fabled large take-out bags, they would assume it is Naruto's birthday. Do you have my order ready?" Anko could not help complaining to herself as she moved her 2 grocery bags. Even though she had the majority of the day off before receiving the meeting summons, it didn't make a difference when she thought back on her time spent bonding with Jadow. Even with her former sensei being a sick bastard, she had to admit that his eyes were the most hideous thing she had ever seen. Worse, during their friendly spar, the man made it very evident that he was just as skilled as her. Because of how equal and friendly their spar was, her fellow ninja guy, a Konoha taijutsu expert, attempted to intervene. She was shocked to learn that, aside from a very few people in the village would even try to rush to her aid in an emergency. However, in this instance, she wasn't in danger, leading an eccentric Jonin to believe that Jadow was attacking her. She will acknowledge that he is just as skilled as she is, but she is aware that he is much stronger than her because he actually stopped Guy's well-known entrance and then repelled it with a simple push of his foot. The 2 Jonin were momentarily taken aback, but Guy quickly corrected them, stating that it was very immature of the older man to stop him. He then resumed his attack. Guy took advantage of the situation by playing the victim after Jadow gave her a look in response to her actions. After what had happened earlier and the stalemate that was their spar, the expression on Jadow's face brightened her day. When the kunoichi realized that Guy was stagnating after a short while of dodging and blocking, they decided to intervene and tip the odds in Guy's favor. The older man would eventually take revenge on the 2 ninjas, but it didn't really help where they would only get a few lucky hits in. Well, so maybe he isn't exactly on par with her. After all, Guy is the only one who really used any techniques or jutsus. After all, taijutsu is his specialty. Anko laughed heartily at the thought of Guy's early beating. The man overextended himself, managed to slip a punch in Guy's defenses, and yelled, "This is for interfering with our spar." He shot her an irritated look for not trying to defuse the situation and having made it worse after the beating. She grinned, acknowledging that she enjoyed the experience. She had to assist Jadow in returning the strange but unusual Jonin to the village and the tower, which irritated her once the summons was issued. She went into a separate room with the other proctors after the meeting ended, and they waited patiently for the Hokage to arrive. After a brief delay of roughly 10 minutes, they had a meeting to discuss the test that they would be administering. To be completely honest, though, this was just a formality to confirm the proctor's positions and establish the parameters of the tests they will be administering. She has to make sure that all the necessary preparations are made for Training Ground 44, gather the necessary supplies, and prepare for additional meetings during the course of the week regarding the tests. Despite being honored to have a respectable position in the exam, she had a gut feeling that it would be extremely difficult because of her reputation as the apprentice of one of the most infamous missing nins in Konoha history. He disregarded the snide glance her landlord shot her as she walked into her building. There's really nothing he can do about her because, in contrast to the other residents of the building, she hasn't done anything to warrant her expulsion, despite the way she presents herself to the public and her personal history. She pays her rent, at least, and that too before embarking on a mission that will undoubtedly keep her past the due date. As she ascended the stairs, she couldn't help but sigh. Live alone in a third-floor apartment on the far side is nice and all, but it doesn't help when your neighbors won't talk to you. After learning that she lives next to an empty apartment for the past 5 years, people avoid her building out of concern that she might visit them in the middle of the night to conduct experiments on them. She eventually arrived at her own apartment, shaking her head to get those thoughts out of her head. The kunoichi noticed that music was playing as she reached for her keys, shuffled the bags in her arms. The music was coming from the apartment next to her, and it was very gentle and melodious, in a style she had never heard of. It was strange because nobody had ever really entered that one before, save for the landowner who occasionally cleaned it. She hurriedly opened her door, glanced around her one-bedroom apartment, and placed her bags on the kitchen counter. It was small, consisting of a TV, a couch, a coffee table, and a shelf holding some movies, combat discs, and books. There aren't many decorations in the room. The white walls make it look simple. The only signs of life in the living room were a few photos she shared with her friends or from events she attended. Years ago, her sensei's memory was erased. After completing her work quickly, she walked back outside into the hallway and knocked on the door, expressing her desire to speak with the person who is obviously unaware that they have moved next door to the notorious Orochimaru apprentice. Seeing no response at all, she knocked once more, this time a little more forcefully. Nothing has changed, but she can now tell that the music seems to be a piano recording. Very well, too. It was fairly pleasing to her ears. However, she had never heard anything like it before, and she was well versed in the various genres of music available. She knocked again, more forcefully, and was about to give up when something moved on the other side of the portal. She even heard some complaining about her stopping from the other side. The man's voice sounded muffled, as if he had just woken up, from what she could tell. The door was sliding open when she smirked and braced herself to meet the person. She had no idea who would be on the other side. "Oh Anko. What are you doing here?" Jadow half lidded her eyes and asked groggily. This took her by surprise to the point where she just stood there, gaping open. She shook her head. "Oye, Anko. What's up? Is your seal acting up now? What are you doing here then?" He asked her how she would know this, and he told her that she lived right next door to him. After she finally snapped out of her daze, she said, "I was just coming over to see who was in here. It's been quite a few years since someone lived in this apartment." Jadow muttered, "Oh, what a coincidence," and beckoned her inside. She went in and noticed the coat rack next to the door where both his coat and hat hung. "Gotta thank Hiru. For that. But my money is on him not really knowing thinking about who my neighbors would be." There were a few boxes scattered across the floor as well as an odd stereo system that appeared to have a smaller device plugged into it playing the music she was hearing. Looking to one side, though, she discovered a whole shelf already crammed with numerous books and tomes that, despite being written in different languages, she could either understand or had never heard of before. He went to the kitchen and opened his refrigerator, saying, "Sorry about the mess, just moved in and all and decided to take a break and read. Guess that I fell asleep on the couch. Care for a beer?" Anko questioned. "Sure. What do you have?" As she sat down on the couch and saw that the book was not the same as before, but she was still unable to understand it. It was the only thing he had, and he told her so. Jadow took out 2 tall cans with harps on them and gave one to her, saying, "Never heard of a stout before, I'll give it a shot." Anko took a moment to examine it before opening the lid, unsure of how to handle the situation. She used to be very irritated and frustrated with the man, but now that he is her neighbor, she feels relieved that someone would not judge her for her past. One thing about Konoha, if there was one, it was that most people had a tendency to be stuck in the past. She is a prime example of it, as is Naruto. She couldn't help but notice the peculiar taste as she drank it. It wasn't like anything she had ever had before. She didn't mind it too much, even though it was a little bitter. "What is this again?" "Guinness," he declared, sipping from the can himself. "It's from a land that I visited and tend to go back to now and again to stock up. I know that not many people agree with the drink, but I like it. I'll be sure to pick up larger variety once I get the chance to hit up some stores." "You seem to be very interested in foreign things," Anko said, looking around the apartment. "How often do you normally travel?" He said, "Quite often," as he took a seat next to her on the couch. Then Anko asked him why he chose to get an apartment when he could have easily stayed with his grandfather. "Normally I'm just going around making my rounds to keep an eye on things for my boss, but he asked for my presence here, so I don't think that I'll be traveling for a while." He laughed, which bothered her. Of course I could stay with him, but it'd be too awkward in that old temple with both him and the kid. And I've been living on my own for years now. It would be just too awkward after having this much independence after so long. Anko couldn't help but agree that it would have been awkward for him to return to staying with Karasu, despite her desire to disagree. Even so, she secretly wished that someone would be waiting for her in a place like that. She looked down at her drink and gave a nod of agreement. "So what do you think of the place?" He shrugged and said, "It's all right. I'll be able to give you a better opinion later after I spent some time here." Anko felt that the man next to her truly loved books as she peered over at the book-filled shelf. More than one, in contrast to Kakashi, who is usually lost in the same book repeatedly. Just as she was about to inquire about his hobby, there was a knock on the door. He stood up, walked over to the door, and gave it a knock. The individual retreated. After a few moments of back and forth knocking, the person on the other side lost patience and yelled, "Open the damn door, you ungrateful brat." Jadow laughed at the reply and opened the door to reveal both Karasu and Naruto. The small boy was busy carrying 4 big bags of takeout, his shikuho strapped to his back. "About damn time you opened it. You're still the same brat who left my nest all those years ago." Taking 2 bags from the boy, the man said, "And you still can't take a joke," before inviting them inside. Naruto placed the bags on the counter in the kitchen after trailing behind Jadow. Jadow peered into one of the bags and saw that the boy was salivating, so she started to too. Anko looked at both men casually, as if it were every day, and said, "He's a ramen addict as well," from the couch. She was used to the child worshipping the noodles, but in her opinion, it was strange to see an adult man holding a bowl of the stuff in a reverent manner. Yes, their family is okay, the kunoichi thought to herself as she turned to face the elderly monk, who shrugged her off. And when he's not doing it as well, how in the world did he influence this behavior in them? The elderly monk said, "Yes," as he took a seat next to Anko. What's that you got there?" "Some kind of foreign beer he had," she remarked while finishing it. "He says that it's called Guinness." The monk looked at his grandsons and muttered, "Ah, that's the stuff he shared with me the last time. If only I remembered that he still had this bad habit of his." "How bad is it?" At that moment, he saw that Jadow had swatted at Naruto's hand that was inching its way towards the bowls. "We'll be here for about half an hour waiting at least until he finishes." The boy attempted again, only to receive a smack on the back of the head. Maybe longer if Naruto doesn't keep his hands away from the bowls. As things started to get a little risky, Karasu decided to stop playing along with the man. He stalked up to him and smashed his shikuho on top of Jadow's head. "Enough, we're here to celebrate you moving in, and it was with the kindness of my heart that I decided to bring you food." Anko found it amusing that the man was glaring at the elderly monk while he rubbed his head and pouted. He laughed at Jadow's expense. Once the absurd ceremony that Jadow had been through was over, the man took out the 4 bowls and placed one at each of the seats around his little table. He extended an offer of beer to the 2 adults, but Karasu took out a jug of sake and gave it to everyone, including Naruto. The 2 grandsons of the elderly monk made a lot of noise during dinner, so it wasn't a quiet one. While that was going on, they all talked about their day's events. Anko thought it strange that anything would happen when Naruto revealed what had happened to Jadow through the use of a scroll, but she also saw a slight movement at the corner of the man's mouth. He told Naruto to come see him in the morning and that dinner was about spending time with friends and family rather than about training. If something strange occurred, the kunoichi couldn't quite agree with that response, especially since the child was the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. She turned to face Karasu, who was sitting to her right. He shot her a look that told her to forget about it. Dinner turned out to be a little more boisterous than it had been the night before. There were a few beers since they were celebrating Jadow moving into the apartment. After dozing off on the couch, Naruto was carried into the bedroom, where Karasu would subsequently drop him off at their temple. Anko passed out too, but he was turned toward the couch by Jadow before he could reach the door to exit. Jadow took a chance and sat down on the couch after the boy had taken his bed and his grandfather had left, pretty much ending the celebration. Falling asleep on his couch with a kunoichi dozing off next to him, and his peculiar stereo system playing gentle, melodic music the entire time. As Naruto gradually awoke, he thought to himself, dreams are weird. Naruto holds that belief based on his personal experiences. That night, he had a dream that seemed so real, as if he was dreaming and not dreaming at all. He ended up training with a small black, furred, purple-eyed fox that had one tail, which greatly confused him. Given that Kyuubi was always characterized as having red fur and 9 tails, it was impossible that it was the kitsune sealed within him. There was no way that it could have been, but regardless of what he told himself, his body in the dream continued to do as the fox said, going through every posture that was listed in the scroll that Jadow had given him as well as some that wasn't. His eyes slowly opened, and the first thing he saw was that he was in a strange room. Then, as he turned to face the side, he saw that same fox staring at him and standing on the bed's side. The fox made eye contact, grinned, lifted one paw, and exclaimed, "Yo, what the hell?"
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.